Pansies. They are never alone that are accompanied with noble thoughts. Sir Philip Sidney. I've finished my book, and now what can I do till this tiresome rain is over? Exclaimed Carrie, as she lay back on the couch with a yawn of weariness. Take another and a better book. The house is full of them, and this is a rare chance for a feast on the best, answered Alice, looking over the pile of volumes in her lap, as she sat on the floor before one of the tall bookcases that lined the room. Not being a bookworm like you, I can't read forever, and you needn't sniff at Wanda, for it's perfectly thrilling, cried Carrie, regretfully turning the crumpled leaves of the Seaside Library copy of that interminable and impossible tale. We should read to improve our minds, and that rubbish is only a waste of time, began Alice, in a warning tone, as she looked up from Romola, over which she had been poring with the delight one feels in meeting an old friend. I don't wish to improve my mind, thank you. I read for amusement in vacation time, and don't want to see any moral works till next autumn. I get enough of them in school. This isn't rubbish. It's full of fine descriptions of scenery, which you skip by the page. I've seen you do it, said Eva, the third young girl in the library, as she shut up the stout book on her knee and began to knit as if this sudden outburst of chat disturbed her enjoyment of The Dove in the Eagle's Nest. I do at first, being carried away by my interest in the people, but I almost always go back and read them afterward, protested Carrie. You know you like to hear about nice clothes, Eva, and Wanda's were simply gorgeous. White velvet and a rope of pearls is one costume, gray velvet and a silver girdle another, and Idalia was all a shower of perfumed laces, and scarlet and gold satin mask dresses, or primrose silk with violets, so lovely. I do revel in 'em. Both girls laughed as Carrie reeled off this list of elegances, with the relish of a French modiste. Well, I'm poor and can't have as many pretty things as I want, so it is delightful to read about women who wear white quilted satin dressing gowns and olive velvet trains with Mechlin lace sweepers to them. Diamonds as large as nuts, and rivers of opals and sapphires, and rubies and pearls, are great fun to read of, if you never even get a look at real ones. I don't believe the love part does me a bit of harm, for we never see such languid swells in America, nor such lovely, naughty ladies, and Ouida scolds them all, so of course she doesn't approve of them, and that's moral, I'm sure. But Alice shook her head again, as Carrie paused out of breath, and said in her serious way, That's the harm of it all. False and foolish things are made interesting, and we read for that, not for any lesson there may be hidden under the velvet and jewels and fine words of your splendid men and women. Now, this book is a wonderful picture of Florence in old times, and the famous people who really lived are painted in it, and it has a true and clean moral that we can all see, and one feels wiser and better for reading it. I do wish you'd leave those trashy things and try something really good. I hate George Eliot, so awfully wise and preachy and dismal. I really couldn't wade through Daniel Deronda, though The Mill on the Floss wasn't bad, answered Carrie, with another yawn, as she recalled the Jew Mordecai's long speeches, and Daniel's meditations. I know you'd like this, said Eva, patting her book with an air of calm content, for she was a modest, common-sense little body, full of innocent fancies and the mildest sort of romance. I love dear Miss Young, with her nice, large families, and their trials, and their pious ways, and pleasant homes full of brothers and sisters, and good fathers and mothers. I'm never tired of them, and have read Daisy Chain 9 times at least. I used to like them, and still think them good for young girls, with Our Own Queechy and Wide, Wide World, and books of that kind. Now I'm 18 I prefer stronger novels, and books by great men and women, because these are always talked about by cultivated people, and when I go into society next winter I wish to be able to listen intelligently, and know what to admire. That's all very well for you, Alice. You are always poking over books, and I dare say you will write them some day, or be a blue stocking. But I've got another year to study and fuss over my education, and I'm going to enjoy myself all I can, and leave the wise books till I come out. But Carrie, there won't be any time to read them, you'll be so busy with parties, and beaux, and traveling, and such things. I would take Alice's advice and read up a little now. It's so nice to know useful things, and be able to find help and comfort in good books when trouble comes, as Ellen Montgomery and Fleda did, and Ethel, and the other girls in Miss Young's stories," said Eva, earnestly, remembering how much the efforts of those natural little heroines had helped her in her own struggles toward self-control and the cheerful bearing of the burdens which come to all. "I don't want to be a priggish Ellen, or a moral Fleda, and I do detest bothering about self-improvement all the time. I know I ought, but I'd rather wait another year or two, and enjoy my vanities in peace just a little longer." And Carrie tucked Wanda under the sofa pillow, as if a trifle ashamed of her society, with Eva's innocent eyes upon her own, and Alice sadly regarding her over the rampart of wise books, which kept growing higher as the eager girl found more and more treasures in this richly stored library. A little silence followed, broken only by the patter of the rain without, the crackle of the wood fire within, and the scratch of a busy pen from a curtained recess at the end of the long room. In the sudden hush the girls heard it, and remembered that they were not alone. "She must have heard every word we said," and Carrie sat up with a dismayed face as she spoke in a whisper. Eva laughed, but Alice shrugged her shoulders, and said tranquilly, "I don't mind. She wouldn't expect much wisdom from schoolgirls." This was cold comfort to Carrie, who was painfully conscious of having been a particularly silly schoolgirl just then. So she gave a groan and lay down again, wishing she had not expressed her views quite so freely, and had kept Wanda for the privacy of her own room. The three girls were the guests of a delightful old lady, who had known their mothers and was fond of renewing her acquaintance with them through their daughters. She loved young people, and each summer invited parties of them to enjoy the delights of her beautiful country house, where she lived alone now, being the childless widow of a somewhat celebrated man. She made it very pleasant for her guests, leaving them free to employ a part of the day as they liked, providing the best of company at dinner, gay revels in the evening, and a large house full of curious and interesting things to examine at their leisure. The rain had spoiled a pleasant plan, and business letters had made it necessary for Mrs. Warburton to leave the three to their own devices after lunch. They had read quietly for several hours, and their hostess was just finishing her last letter when fragments of the conversation reached her ear. She listened with amusement, unconscious that they had forgotten her presence, finding the different views very characteristic, and easily explained by the difference of the homes out of which the three friends came. Alice was the only daughter of a scholarly man and a brilliant woman, therefore her love of books and desire to cultivate her mind was very natural, but the danger in her case would be in the neglect of other things equally important, too varied reading, and a superficial knowledge of many authors rather than a true appreciation of a few of the best and greatest. Eva was one of many children in a happy home, with a busy father, a pious mother, and many domestic cares, as well as joys, already falling to the dutiful girl's lot. Her instincts were sweet and unspoiled, and she only needed to be shown where to find new and better helpers for the real trials of life, when the childish heroines she loved could no longer serve her in the years to come. Carrie was one of the ambitious yet commonplace girls who wished to shine, without knowing the difference between the glitter of a candle which attracts moths, and the serene light of a star, or the cheery glow of a fire round which all love to gather. Her mother's aims were not high, and the two pretty daughters knew that she desired good matches for them, educated them for that end, and expected them to do their parts when the time came. The elder sister was now at a watering place with her mother, and Carrie hoped that a letter would soon come telling her that Mary was settled. During her stay with Mrs. Warburton she had learned a good deal, and was unconsciously contrasting the life here with the frivolous one at home, made up of public show and private sacrifice of comfort, dignity, and peace. Here were people who dressed simply, enjoyed conversation, kept up their accomplishments even when old, and were so busy, lovable, and charming, that poor Carrie often felt vulgar, ignorant, and mortified among them, in spite of their fine breeding and kindliness. The society Mrs. Warburton drew about her was the best, and old and young, rich and poor, wise and simple, all seemed genuine, glad to give or receive, enjoy and rest, and then go out to their work refreshed by the influences of the place and the sweet old lady who made it what it was. The girls would soon begin life for themselves, and it was well that they had this little glimpse of really good society before they left the shelter of home to choose friends, pleasures, and pursuits for themselves, as all young women do when once launched. The sudden silence and then the whispers suggested to the listener that she had perhaps heard something not meant for her ears, so she presently emerged with her letters, and said, as she came smiling toward the group about the fire, "How are you getting through this long, dull afternoon, my dears? Quiet as mice till just now. What woke you up? A battle of the books? Alice looks as if she had laid in plenty of ammunition, and you were preparing to besiege her." The girls laughed, and all rose, for Madame Warburton was a stately old lady, and people involuntarily treated her with great respect, even in this mannerless age. "We were only talking about books," began Carrie, deeply grateful that Wanda was safely out of sight. "And we couldn't agree," added Eva, running to ring the bell for the man to take the letters, for she was used to these little offices at home, and loved to wait on Madame. "Thanks, my love. Now let us talk a little, if you are tired of reading, and if you like to let me share the discussion. Comparing tastes in literature is always a pleasure, and I used to enjoy talking over books with my girl friends more than anything else." As she spoke, Mrs. Warburton sat down in the chair which Alice rolled up, drew Eva to the cushion at her feet, and nodded to the others as they settled again, with interested faces, one at the table where the pile of chosen volumes now lay, the other erect upon the couch where she had been practicing the poses. Full of languid grace, so much affected by her favorite heroines. Carrie was laughing at me for liking wise books and wanting to improve my mind. "Is it foolish and a waste of time?" asked Alice, eager to convince her friend and secure so powerful an ally. "No, my dear, it is a very sensible desire, and I wish more girls had it. Only don't be greedy and read too much. Cramming and smattering is as bad as promiscuous novel reading, or no reading at all. Choose carefully, read intelligently, and digest thoroughly each book, and then you make it your own," answered Mrs. Warburton, quite in her element now, for she loved to give advice, as most old ladies do. "But how can we know what to read if we mayn't follow our tastes?" said Carrie, trying to be interested and intelligent, in spite of her fear that a schoolmarmy lecture was in store for her. "Ask advice, and so cultivate a true and refined taste. I always judge people's characters a good deal by the books they like, as well as by the company they keep, so one should be careful, for this is a pretty good test. Another is, be sure that whatever will not bear reading aloud is not fit to read to oneself. Many young girls ignorantly or curiously take up books quite worthless, and really harmful, because under the fine writing and brilliant color lurks immorality or the false sentiment which gives wrong ideas of life and things which should be sacred. They think, perhaps, that no one knows this taste of theirs, but they are mistaken, for it shows itself in many ways, and betrays them. Attitudes, looks, careless words, and a morbid or foolishly romantic view of certain things show plainly that the maidenly instincts are blunted, and harm done that perhaps can never be repaired." Mrs. Warburton kept her eyes fixed upon the tall andirons as if gravely reproving them, which was a great relief to Carrie, whose cheeks glowed as she stirred uneasily and took up a screen as if to guard them from the fire. But conscience pricked her sharply, and memory, like a traitor, recalled many a passage or scene in her favorite books which she could not have read aloud even to that old lady, though she enjoyed them in private. Nothing very bad, but false and foolish, poor food for a lively fancy and young mind to feed on, as the weariness or excitement which always followed plainly proved, since one should feel refreshed, not cloyed, with an intellectual feast. Alice, with both elbows on the table, listened with wide-awake eyes, and Eva watched the raindrops trickle clown the pane with an intent expression, as if asking herself if she had ever done this naughty thing. "Then there is another fault," continued Mrs. Warburton, well knowing that her first shot had hit its mark, and anxious to be just. "Some book-loving lassies have a mania for trying to read everything, and dip into works far beyond their powers, or try too many different kinds of self-improvement at once. So they get a muddle of useless things into their heads, instead of well-assorted ideas and real knowledge. They must learn to wait and select, for each age has its proper class of books, and what is Greek to us at 18 may be just what we need at 30. One can get mental dyspepsia on meat and wine as well as on ice cream and frosted cake, you know." Alice smiled, and pushed away 4 of the 8 books she had selected, as if afraid she had been greedy, and now felt that it was best to wait a little. Eva looked up with some anxiety in her frank eyes as she said, "Now it is my turn. Must I give up my dear homely books, and take to Ruskin, Kant, or Plato?" Mrs. Warburton laughed, as she stroked the pretty brown head at her knee. "Not yet, my love, perhaps never, for those are not the masters you need, I fancy. Since you like stories about everyday people, try some of the fine biographies of real men and women about whom you should know something. You will find their lives full of stirring, helpful, and lovely experiences, and in reading of these you will get courage and hope and faith to bear your own trials as they come. True stories suit you, and are the best, for there we get real tragedy and comedy, and the lessons all must learn." "Thank you. I will begin at once if you will kindly give me a list of such as would be good for me," cried Eva, with the sweet docility of one eager to be all that is lovable and wise in woman. "Give us a list, and we will try to improve in the best way. You know what we need, and love to help foolish girls, or you wouldn't be so kind and patient with us," said Alice, going to sit beside Carrie, hoping for much discussion of this, to her, very interesting subject. "I will, with pleasure, but I read few modern novels, so I may not be a good judge there. Most of them seem very poor stuff, and I cannot waste time even to skim them as some people do. I still like the old-fashioned ones I read as a girl, though you would laugh at them. Did any of you ever read Thaddeus of Warsaw? I have, and thought it very funny, so were Evelina and Cecilia. I wanted to try Smollett and Fielding, after reading some fine essays about them, but Papa told me I must wait," said Alice. "Ah, my dears, in my day, Thaddeus was our hero, and we thought the scene where he and Miss Beaufort are in the park a most thrilling one. 2 fops ask Thaddeus where he got his boots, and he replies, with withering dignity, 'Where I got my sword, gentlemen.' I treasured the picture of that episode for a long time. Thaddeus wears a hat as full of black plumes as a hearse, Hessian boots with tassels, and leans over Mary, who languishes on the seat in a short-waisted gown, limp scarf, poke bonnet, and large bag, the height of elegance then, but very funny now. Then William Wallace in Scottish Chiefs, bless me! We cried over him as much as you do over your heir of Clifton, or whatever the boy's name is. You wouldn't get through it, I fancy, and as for poor, dear, prosy Richardson, his letter-writing heroines would bore you to death. Just imagine a lover saying to a friend, 'I begged my angel to stay and sip 1 dish of tea. She sipped 1 dish and flew.' Now, I'm sure that's sillier than anything the Duchess ever wrote with her 5 o'clock teas and flirtations over plum cake on lawns," cried Carrie, as they all laughed at the immortal Lovelace. "I never read Richardson, but he couldn't be duller than Henry James, with his everlasting stories, full of people who talk a great deal and amount to nothing. I like the older novels best, and enjoy some of Scott's and Miss Edgeworth's better than Howells's, or any of the modern realistic writers, with their elevators, and paint pots, and everyday people," said Alice, who wasted little time on light literature. "I'm glad to hear you say so, for I have an old-fashioned fancy that I'd rather read about people as they were, for that is history, or as they might and should be, for that helps us in our own efforts, not as they are, for that we know, and are all sufficiently commonplace ourselves, to be the better for a nobler and wider view of life and men than any we are apt to get, so busy are we earning daily bread, or running after fortune, honor, or some other bubble. But I mustn't lecture or I shall bore you, and forget that I am your hostess, whose duty it is to amuse." As Mrs. Warburton paused, Carrie, anxious to change the subject, said, with her eyes on a curious jewel which the old lady wore, "I also like true stories, and you promised to tell us about that lovely pin some day. This is just the time for it, please do." "With pleasure, for the little romance is quite apropos to our present chat. It is a very simple tale, and rather sad, but it had a great influence on my life, and this brooch is very dear to me." As Mrs. Warburton sat silent a moment, the girls all looked with interest at the quaint pin which clasped the soft folds of muslin over the black silk dress which was as becoming to the still handsome woman as the cap on her white hair and the winter roses in her cheeks. The ornament was in the shape of a pansy. Its purple leaves were of amethyst, the yellow of topaz, and in the middle lay a diamond drop of dew. Several letters were delicately cut on its golden stem, and a guard pin showed how much its wearer valued it. My sister Lucretia was a good deal older than I, for the 3 boys came between, began Mrs. Warburton, still gazing at the fire, as if from its ashes the past rose up bright and warm again. She was a very lovely and superior girl, and I looked up to her with wonder as well as adoration. Others did the same, and at 18 she was engaged to a charming man, who would have made his mark had he lived. She was too young to marry then, and Frank Lyman had a fine opening to practice his profession at the South. So they parted for 2 years, and it was then that he gave her the brooch, saying to her, as she whispered how lonely she should be without him, "This pensée is a happy, faithful thought of me. Wear it, dearest girl, and don't pine while we are separated. Read and study, write much to me, and remember, they never are alone that are accompanied with noble thoughts." "Wasn't that sweet?" cried Eva, pleased with the beginning of the tale. "So romantic," added Carrie, recalling the amber amulet one of her pet heroes wore for years, and died kissing, after he had killed some 50 Arabs in the desert. "Did she read and study?" asked Alice, with a soft color in her cheek, and eager eyes, for a budding romance was folded away in the depths of her maidenly heart, and she liked a love story. "I'll tell you what she did, for it was rather remarkable at that day, when girls had little schooling, and picked up accomplishments as they could. The first winter she read and studied at home, and wrote much to Mr. Lyman. I have their letters now, and very fine ones they are, though they would seem old-fashioned to you young things. Curious love letters, full of advice, the discussion of books, report of progress, glad praise, modest gratitude, happy plans, and a faithful affection that never wavered, though Lucretia was beautiful and much admired, and the dear fellow a great favorite among the brilliant southern women. The second spring, Lucretia, anxious to waste no time, and ambitious to surprise Lyman, decided to go and study with old Dr. Gardner at Portland. He fitted young men for college, was a friend of our father's, and had a daughter who was a very wise and accomplished woman. That was a very happy summer, and Lou got on so well that she begged to stay all winter. It was a rare chance, for there were no colleges for girls then, and very few advantages to be had, and the dear creature burned to improve every faculty, that she might be more worthy of her lover. She fitted herself for college with the youths there, and did wonders, for love sharpened her wits, and the thought of that happy meeting spurred her on to untiring exertion. Lyman was expected in May, and the wedding was to be in June, but alas for the poor girl! The yellow fever came, and he was one of the first victims. They never met again, and nothing was left her of all that happy time but his letters, his library, and the pansy. Mrs. Warburton paused to wipe a few quiet tears from her eyes, while the girls sat in sympathetic silence. "We thought it would kill her, that sudden change from love, hope, and happiness to sorrow, death, and solitude. But hearts don't break, my dears, if they know where to go for strength. Lucretia did, and after the first shock was over found comfort in her books, saying, with a brave, bright look, and the sweetest resignation, 'I must go on trying to be more worthy of him, for we shall meet again in God's good time and he shall see that I do not forget.' That was better than tears and lamentation, and the long years that followed were beautiful and busy ones, full of dutiful care for us at home after our mother died, of interest in all the good works of her time, and a steady, quiet effort to improve every faculty of her fine mind, till she was felt to be one of the noblest women in our city. Her influence was widespread, all the intelligent people sought her, and when she traveled she was welcome everywhere, for cultivated persons have a freemasonry of their own, and are recognized at once." "Did she ever marry?" asked Carrie, feeling that no life could be quite successful without that great event. "Never. She felt herself a widow, and wore black to the day of her death. Many men asked her hand, but she refused them all, and was the sweetest old maid ever seen, cheerful and serene to the very last, for she was ill a long time, and found her solace and stay still in the beloved books. Even when she could no longer read them, her memory supplied her with the mental food that kept her soul strong while her body failed. It was wonderful to see and hear her repeating fine lines, heroic sayings, and comforting psalms through the weary nights when no sleep would come, making friends and helpers of the poets, philosophers, and saints whom she knew and loved so well. It made death beautiful, and taught me how victorious an immortal soul can be over the ills that vex our mortal flesh. She died at dawn on Easter Sunday, after a quiet night, when she had given me her little legacy of letters, books, and the one jewel she had always worn, repeating her lover's words to comfort me. I had read the commendatory prayer, and as I finished she whispered, with a look of perfect peace, "Shut the book, dear, I need study no more. I have hoped and believed, now I shall know," and so went happily away to meet her lover after patient waiting. The sigh of the wind was the only sound that broke the silence till the quiet voice went on again, as if it loved to tell the story, for the thought of soon seeing the beloved sister took the sadness from the memory of the past. I also found my solace in books, for I was very lonely when she was gone, my father being dead, the brothers married, and home desolate. I took to study and reading as a congenial employment, feeling no inclination to marry, and for many years was quite contented among my books. But in trying to follow in dear Lucretia's footsteps, I unconsciously fitted myself for the great honor and happiness of my life, and curiously enough I owed it to a book. Mrs. Warburton smiled as she took up a shabby little volume from the table where Alice had laid it, and quick to divine another romance, Eva said, like a story-loving child, "Do tell about it." The other was so sad. This begins merrily, and has a wedding in it, as young girls think all tales should. Well, when I was about 35, I was invited to join a party of friends on a trip to Canada, that being the favorite jaunt in my young days. I'd been studying hard for some years, and needed rest, so I was glad to go. As a good book for an excursion, I took this Wordsworth in my bag. It is full of fine passages, you know, and I loved it, for it was one of the books given to Lucretia by her lover. We had a charming time, and were on our way to Quebec when my little adventure happened. I was in raptures over the Grand St. Lawrence as we steamed slowly from Montreal that lovely summer day. I could not read, but sat on the upper deck, feasting my eyes and dreaming dreams as even-stayed maiden ladies will when out on a holiday. Suddenly I caught the sound of voices in earnest discussion on the lower deck, and glancing down, saw several gentlemen leaning against the rail as they talked over certain events of great public interest at that moment. I knew that a party of distinguished persons were on board, as my friend's husband, Dr. Tracy, knew some of them, and pointed out Mr. Warburton as one of the rising scientific men of the day. I remembered that my sister had met him years ago, and much admired him both for his own gifts and because he had known Lyman. As other people were listening, I felt no delicacy about doing the same, for the conversation was an eloquent one, and well worth catching. So interested did I become that I forgot the great rafts floating by, the picturesque shores, the splendid river, and leaned nearer and nearer that no word might be lost, till my book slid out of my lap and fell straight down upon the head of one of the gentlemen, giving him a smart blow, and knocking his hat overboard. "Oh, what did you do?" cried the girls, much amused at this unromantic catastrophe. Mrs. Warburton clasped her hands dramatically, as her eyes twinkled and a pretty color came into her cheeks at the memory of that exciting moment. "My dears, I could have dropped with mortification. What could I do but dodge and peep as I waited to see the end of this most untoward accident? Fortunately I was alone on that side of the deck, so none of the ladies saw my mishap, and slipping along the seat to a distant corner, I hid my face behind a convenient newspaper, as I watched the little flurry of fishing up the hat by a man in a boat near by, and the merriment of the gentlemen over this assault of William Wordsworth upon Samuel Warburton. The poor book passed from hand to hand, and many jokes were made upon the fair Helen whose name was written on the paper cover which projected it. I knew a Miss Harper once, a lovely woman, but her name was not Helen, and she is dead, God bless her, I heard Mr. Warburton say, as he flapped his straw hat to dry it, and rubbed his head, which fortunately was well covered with thick grey hair at that time. I longed to go down and tell him who I was, but I had not the courage to face all those men. It really was most embarrassing, so I waited for a more private moment to claim my book, as I knew we should not land till night, so there was no danger of losing it. This is rather unusual stuff for a woman to be reading, Some literary lady doubtless. Better look her up, Warburton. You'll know her by the color of her stockings when she comes down to lunch, said a jolly old gentleman, in a tone that made me rouge high, as Evelina says. I shall know her by her intelligent face and conversation, if this book belongs to a lady. It will be an honor and a pleasure to meet a woman who enjoys Wordsworth, for in my opinion he is one of our truest poets, answered Mr. Warburton, putting the book in his pocket, with a look and a tone that were most respectful and comforting to me just then. I hoped he would examine the volume, for Lucretia's and Lyman's names were on the fly-leaf, and that would be a delightful introduction for me. So I said nothing and bided my time, feeling rather foolish when we all filed into lunch, and I saw the other party glancing at the ladies at the table. Mr. Warburton's eye paused a moment as it passed from Mrs. Tracy to me, and I fear I blushed like a girl, my dears, for Samuel had very fine eyes, and I remembered the stout gentleman's unseemly joke about the stockings. Mine were white as snow, for I had a neat foot, and was fond of nice hose and well-made shoes. I am so still, as you see. Here the old lady displayed a small foot in a black silk stocking and delicate slipper, with the artless pride a woman feels, at any age, in one of her best points. The girls gratified her by a murmur of admiration, and decorously readjusting the folds of her gown, she went on with the most romantic episode of her quiet life. I retired to my stateroom after lunch to compose myself, and when I emerged, in the cool of the afternoon, my first glance showed me that the hour had come, for there on deck was Mr. Warburton, talking to Mrs. Tracy, with my book in his hand. I hesitated a moment, for in spite of my age I was rather shy, and really it was not an easy thing to apologize to a strange gentleman for dropping books on his head and spoiling his hat. Men think so much of their hats, you know. I was spared embarrassment, however, for he saw me and came to me at once, saying, in the most cordial manner, as he showed the names on the fly-leaf of my Wordsworth, I am sure we need no other introduction but the names of these two dear friends of ours. I am very glad to find that Miss Helen Harper is the little girl I saw once or twice at your father's house some years ago, and to meet her so pleasantly again. That made everything easy and delightful, and when I had apologized and been laughingly assured that he considered it rather an honor than otherwise to be assaulted by so great a man, we fell to talking of old times, and soon forgot that we were strangers. He was 20 years older than I, but a handsome man, and a most interesting and excellent one, as we all know. He had lost a young wife long ago, and had lived for science ever since, but it had not made him dry, or cold, or selfish. He was very young at heart for all his wisdom, and enjoyed that holiday like a boy out of school. So did I, and never dreamed that anything would come of it but a pleasant friendship founded on our love for those now dead and gone. Dear me! How strangely things turn out in this world of ours, and how the dropping of that book changed my life. Well, that was our introduction, and that first long conversation was followed by many more equally charming. During the 3 weeks our parties were much together, as both were taking the same trip, and Dr. Tracy was glad to meet his old friend. I need not tell you how delightful such society was to me, nor how surprised I was when, on the last day before we parted, Mr. Warburton, who had answered many questions of mine during these long chats of ours, asked me a very serious one, and I found that I could answer it as he wished. It brought me great honor as well as happiness. I fear I was not worthy of it, but I tried to be, and felt a tender satisfaction in thinking that I owed it to dear Lucretia, in part at least, for my effort to imitate her made me fitter to become a wise man's wife, and 30 years of very sweet companionship was my reward. As she spoke, Mrs. Warburton bowed her head before the portrait of a venerable old man which hung above the mantelpiece. It was a pretty, old-fashioned expression of wifely pride and womanly tenderness in the fine old lady, who forgot her own gifts, and felt only humility and gratitude to the man who had found in her a comrade in intellectual pursuits, as well as a helpmeet at home and a gentle prop for his declining years. The girls looked up with eyes full of something softer than mere curiosity, and felt in their young hearts how precious and honorable such a memory must be, how true and beautiful such a marriage was, and how sweet wisdom might become when it went hand in hand with love. Alice spoke first, saying, as she touched the worn cover of the little book with a new sort of respect. "Thank you very much. Perhaps I ought not to have taken this from the corner shelves in your sanctum? I wanted to find the rest of the lines Mr. Thornton quoted last night, and didn't stop to ask leave." "You are welcome, my love, for you know how to treat books. Yes, those in that little case are my precious relics. I keep them all, from my childish hymn book to my great-grandfather's brass-bound Bible, for by and by when I sit looking towards sunset, as dear Lydia Maria Child calls our last days, I shall lose my interest in other books, and take comfort in these. At the end as at the beginning of life we are all children again, and love the songs our mothers sung us, and find the one true book our best teacher, as we draw near to God." As the reverent voice paused, a ray of sunshine broke through the parting clouds, and shone full on the serene old face turned to meet it, with a smile that welcomed the herald of a lovely sunset. "The rain is over. There will be just time for a run in the garden before dinner, girls. I must go and change my cap, for literary ladies should not neglect to look well after the ways of their household and keep themselves tidy, no matter how old they may be." And with a nod Mrs. Warburton left them, wondering what the effect of the conversation would be on the minds of her young guests. Alice went away to the garden, thinking of Lucretia and her lover, as she gathered flowers in the sunshine. Conscientious Eva took the Life of Mary Somerville to her room, and read diligently for half an hour. That no time might be lost in her new course of study, Carrie sent Wanda and her finery up the chimney in a lively blaze, and, as she watched the book burn, decided to take her blue and gold volume of Tennyson with her on her next trip to Nahant, in case any eligible learned or literary man's head should offer itself as a shining mark. Since a good marriage was the end of life, why not follow Mrs. Warburton's example, and make a really excellent one? When they all met at dinner-time, the old lady was pleased to see a nosegay of fresh pansies in the bosoms of her 3 youngest guests, and to hear Alice whisper, with grateful eyes, "We wear your flower to show you that we don't mean to forget the lesson you so kindly gave us, and to fortify ourselves with noble thoughts, as you and she did." Water-lilies. A party of people, young and old, sat on the piazza of a seaside hotel one summer morning, discussing plans for the day as they waited for the mail. "Hello! Here comes Christy Johnstone!" exclaimed one of the young men perched on the railing, who was poisoning the fresh air with the sickly scent of a cigarette. "So 'tis, with Flucker, the baddish boy, in tow, as large as life," added another, with a pleasant laugh as he turned to look. The newcomers certainly looked somewhat like Charles Reade's picturesque pair, and everyone watched them with idle interest as they drew nearer. A tall, robust girl of 17, with dark eyes and hair, a fine color on her brown cheek, and vigor in every movement, came up the rocky path from the beach with a basket of lobsters on one arm, of fish on the other, and a wicker tray of water-lilies on her head. The scarlet and silver of the fish contrasted prettily with the dark blue of her rough dress, and the pile of water flowers made a fitting crown for this bonny young fishwife. A sturdy lad of 12 came lurching after her in a pair of very large rubber boots, with a dilapidated straw hat on the back of his head and a pail on either arm. Straight on went the girl, never turning head or eyes as she passed the group on the piazza and vanished round the corner, though it was evident that she heard the laugh the last speech produced, for the color deepened in her cheeks and her step quickened. The boy, however, returned the glances bent upon him, and answered the smiles with such a cheerful grin that the youth with the cigarette called out, "Good morning, skipper! Where do you hail from?" "Island yender," answered the boy, with a gesture of his thumb over his shoulder. "Oh, you are the lighthouse keeper, are you?" "No, I ain't. Me and Grandpa's fisherman now." "Your name is Flucker Johnstone, and your sister's Christy, I think?" added the youth, enjoying the amusement of the young ladies about him. "It's Sammy Bowen, and hern's Ruth." "Have you got a Boaz over there for her?" "No, we've got a devilfish, a real whacker." This unexpected reply produced a roar from the gentleman, while the boy grinned good-naturedly, though without the least idea what the joke was. Pretty Miss Ellery, who had been told that she had a rippling laugh, rippled sweetly as she leaned over the railing to ask, "Are those lilies in your pails? I want some if they are for sale. Sister'll fetch 'em round when she's left the lobs." "I ain't got none, This is bait for them fellers. And, as if reminded of business by the yells of several boys who had just caught sight of him, Sammy abruptly weighed anchor and ran before the wind toward the stable. Funny lot, these natives! Act as if they own the place and are as stupid as their own fish, said the youth in the white yachting suit, as he flung away his cigarette end. Don't agree with you, Fred. I've known people of this sort all my life, and a finer set of honest, hard-working, independent men I never met, brave as lions and tender as women in spite of their rough ways, answered the other young man, who wore blue flannel and had a gold band on his cap. Sailors and soldiers always stand by one another, so of course you see the best side of these fellows, Captain. The girls are fine creatures, I grant you, but their good looks don't last long, more's the pity. Few women's would with the life they lead, so full of hard work, suspense, and sorrow. No one knows till one is tried, how much courage and faith it takes to keep young and happy when the men one loves are on the great sea, said a quiet, gray-haired lady, as she laid her hand on the knee of the young man in blue with a look that made him smile affectionately at her, with his own brown hand on hers. Shouldn't wonder if Ben Bowen was laid up, since the girl brings the fish. He's a fine old fellow. I've been to No Man's Land many a time blue fishing with him, must ask after him, said an elderly gentleman who was pacing to and fro yearning for the morning papers. We might go over to the island and have a chowder party or a fish fry some moonlight night. I haven't been here for several years, but it used to be great fun, and I suppose we can do it now, suggested Miss Ellery with a laugh. By Jove, we will! And look up Christy, ask her when she comes round, said Mr. Fred, the youthful dude, untwining his languid legs as if the prospect put a little life into him. Of course we pay for any trouble we give. These people will do anything for money, began Miss Ellery, but Captain John, as they called the sailor, held up his hand with a warning. Hush! She's coming, as Ruth's weather-beaten brown hat turned the corner. She paused a moment to drop the empty baskets, shake her skirts, and put up a black braid that had fallen down. Then, with the air of one resolved to do a distasteful task as quickly as possible, she came up the steps, held out the rough basket cover, and said in a clear voice, Would any of the ladies like some fresh lilies? 10 cents a bunch. A murmur from the ladies expressed their admiration of the beautiful flowers, and the gentlemen pressed forward to buy and present every bunch with gallant haste. Ruth's eyes shone as the money fell into her hand, and several voices begged her to bring more lilies while they lasted. I didn't know the darlings would grow in salt water, said Miss Ellery, as she fondly gazed upon the cluster Mr. Fred had just offered her. They don't? There's a little fresh water pond on our island, and they grow there, only place for miles round. And Ruth looked at the delicate girl in ruffled white lawn and a mull hat, with a glance of mingled pity for her ignorance and admiration for her beauty. How silly of me! I am such a goose! And Miss Ellery gurgled as she hid her face behind her red parasol. Ask about the fish fry, whispered Mr. Fred, putting his head behind the rosy screen to assure the pretty creature that he didn't know any better himself. Oh yes, I will! And quite consoled, Miss Ellery called out, Girl, will you tell me if we can have chowder parties on your rocks as we used to a few seasons ago? If you bring your own fish. Grandpa is sick and can't get 'em for you. We will provide them, but who will cook them for us? It's such horrid work. Anyone can fry fish. I will if you want me to. And Ruth half smiled, remembering that this girl who shuddered at the idea of pork in a hot frying pan used to eat as heartily as anyone when the crisp brown cunners were served up. Very good, then we'll engage you as cook, and come over tonight if it's clear and our fishing prospers. Don't forget a dozen of the finest lilies for this lady tomorrow morning. Pay you now may not be up. And Mr. Fred dropped a bright silver dollar into the basket with a patronizing air, intended to impress this rather too independent young person with a proper sense of inferiority. Ruth quietly shook the money out upon the doormat, and said with a sudden sparkle in her black eyes, It's doubtful if I bring any more. Better wait till I do. I'm sorry your grandfather is sick. I'll come over and see him by and by, and bring the papers if he would like some. said the elderly gentleman as he came up with a friendly nod and real interest in his face. Very much, thank you, sir. He is very feeble now. And Ruth turned with a bright smile to welcome kind Mr. Wallace, who had not forgotten the old man. Christy has got a nice little temper of her own, and don't know how to treat a fellow when he wants to do her a favor, growled Mr. Fred, pocketing his dollar with a disgusted air. She appears to know how to treat a gentleman when he offers one, answered Blue Jacket, with a twinkle of the eye as if he enjoyed the other's discomfiture. Girls of that class always put on airs if they are the least bit pretty, so absurd, said Miss Ellery, pulling up her long gloves as she glanced at the brown arms of the fisher maiden. Girls of any class like to be treated with respect. Modesty in linsey-woolsey is as sweet as in muslin, my dear, and should be even more admired, according to my old-fashioned way of thinking, said the gray-haired lady. Here, murmured her sailor nephew with an approving nod. It was evident that Ruth had heard also, as she turned to go, for with a quick gesture she pulled 3 great lilies from her hat and laid them on the old lady's lap, saying with a grateful look, Thank you, ma'am. She had seen Miss Scott hand her bunch to a meek little governess who had been forgotten, and this was all she had to offer in return for the kindness which is so sweet to poor girls whose sensitive pride gets often wounded by trifles like these. She was going without her baskets when Captain John swung himself over the railing, and ran after her with them. He touched his cap as he met her, and was thanked with as bright a smile as that the elder gentleman had received, for his respectful Miss Bowen pleased her much after the rude girl, and the money tossed to her as if she were a beggar. When he came back the mail had arrived, and all scattered at once, Mr. Fred to spend the dollar in more cigarettes, and Captain John to settle carefully in his buttonhole the water-lily Aunt Mary gave him, before both young men went off to play tennis as if their bread depended on it. As it bid fair to be a moonlight night, the party of a dozen young people, with Miss Scott and Mr. Wallace to act as matron and admiral of the fleet, set off to the island about sunset. Fish in abundance had been caught, and a picnic supper provided to be eaten on the rocks when the proper time arrived. They found Sammy, in a clean blue shirt and a hat less like a Fiji headpiece, willing to do the honors of the island, beaming like a freckled young merman as he paddled out to pull up the boats. Fire's all ready for kindlin', and Ruth's slicin' the pertaters. Hope them fish is cleaned? He added with a face of deep anxiety, for that weary task would fall to him if not already done, and the thought desolated his boyish soul. All ready, Sam! Lend a hand with these baskets, and then steer for the lighthouse. The ladies want to see that first, answered Captain John, as he tossed a stray cookie into Sammy's mouth with a smile that caused that youth to cleave to him like a burr all the evening. The young people scattered over the rocks, and hastened to visit the points of interest before dark. They climbed the lighthouse tower, and paid Aunt Nabby and Grandpa a call at the weather-beaten little house, where the old woman lent them a mammoth coffee pot, and promised that Ruth would dish up them fish in good shape at 8 punctual. Then they strolled away to see the fresh-water pond where the lilies grew. How curious that such a thing should be here right in the middle of the salt sea, said one of the girls, as they stood looking at the quiet pool while the tide dashed high upon the rocks all about them. Not more curious than how it is possible for anything so beautiful and pure as one of those lilies to grow from the mud at the bottom of the pond. The ugly yellow ones are not so out of place, but no one cares for them, and they smell horridly, added another girl in a reflective tone. Instinct sends the white lily straight up to the sun and air, and the strong slender stem anchors it to the rich earth below, out of which it has power to draw the nourishment that makes it so lovely and keeps it spotless, unless slugs and flies and boys spoil it, added Miss Scott as she watched Mr. Fred poke and splash with his cane after a half-closed flower. The naughty things have all shut up and spoilt the pretty sight. I'm so disappointed, sighed Miss Ellery, surveying the green buds with great disfavor as she had planned to wear some in her hair and act Undine. You must come early in the morning if you want to see them at their best. I've read somewhere that when the sun first strikes them they open rapidly, and it is a lovely sight. I shall try to see it some day if I can get here in time, said Miss Scott. How romantic old maids are, whispered one girl to another. So are young ones. Hear what Floss Ellery is saying. answered the other, and both giggled under their big hats as they caught these words followed by the rippling laugh. All flowers open and show their hearts when the sun shines on them at the right moment. I wish human flowers would, murmured Mr. Fred, and then, as if rather alarmed at his own remark, he added hastily, I'll get that big lily out there and make it bloom for you. Trusting to an old log that lay in the pond, he went to the end and bent to pull in the half-shut flower. But this too ardent sun was not to make it blossom, for his foot slipped and down he went up to his knees in mud and water. Save him! Oh, save him! Shrieked Miss Ellery, clutching Captain John, who was laughing like a boy, while the other lads shouted and the girls added their shrill merriment as poor Fred scrambled to the shore, a wreck of the gallant craft that had set sail in spotless white. What the deuce shall I do? He asked in a tone of despair as they flocked about him to condole even while they laughed. Roll up your trousers and borrow Sam's boots. The old lady will dry your shoes and socks while you are at supper, and have them ready to wear home, suggested Captain John, who was used to duckings and made light of them. The word supper made one carnal-minded youth sniff the air and announce that he smelt something good, and at once every one turned toward the picnic ground, like chickens hurrying to the barn at feeding time. Fred vanished into the cottage, and the rest gathered about the great fire of driftwood fast turning to clear coals, over which Ruth was beginning her long hot task. She wore a big apron, a red handkerchief over her head, had her sleeves rolled up, and was so intent on her work that she merely nodded and smiled as the newcomers greeted her with varying degrees of courtesy. She looks like a handsome gypsy, with her dark face and that red thing in the firelight. I wish I could paint her, said Miss Scott, who was very young at heart in spite of her 50 years and gray head. So do I, but we can remember it. I do like to see a girl work with a will, even at frying fish. Most of 'em dawdle so at the few things they try to do. There's a piece of energy for you. And Captain John leaned forward from his rocky seat to watch Ruth, who just then caught up the coffee pot about to boil over, and with the other hand saved her frying pan from capsizing on its unsteady bed of coals. She is a nice girl, and I'm much interested in her. Mr. Wallace says he will tell us her story by and by if we care to hear it. He has known the old man a long time. Don't forget to remind him, Auntie. I like a yarn after mess. And Captain John went off to bring the first plate of fish to the dear old lady who had been a mother to him for many years. It was a merry supper, and the moon was up before it ended, for everything tasted so good. The hearty young appetites sharpened by sea air were hard to satisfy. When the last schooner had vanished and nothing but olives and oyster crackers remained, the party settled on a sloping rock out of range of the fire, and reposed for a brief period to recover from the exertions of the feast, having, like the heroes in the old story, eaten mightily for the space of an hour. Mr. Fred in the capacious boots was a never-failing source of amusement, and consequently somewhat subdued. But Miss Ellery consoled him, and much food sustained him till his shoes were dry. Ruth remained to clear up, and Sammy to gorge himself on the remnants of sweet cake, which he could not bear to see wasted. So, when someone proposed telling stories till they were ready to sing, Mr. Wallace was begged to begin. It is only something about this island, but you may like to hear it just now, said the genial old gentleman, settling his handkerchief over his bald head for fear of cold, and glancing at the attentive young faces grouped about him in the moonlight. Some 20 years ago there was a wreck over there on those great rocks. You fellows have heard about it, so I'll only say that a very brave sailor, a native of the port here, swam out with a rope and saved a dozen men and women. I'll call him Sam. Well, one of the women was an English governess, and when the lady she was with went on her way after the wreck, this pretty girl, who by the way was a good deal hurt trying to save the child she had in charge, was left behind to recover, and marry the brave sailor, of course, cried one of the girls. Exactly. And a very happy pair they were. She had no family who wanted her at home. Her father had been a clergyman, I believe, and she was well born, but Sam was a fine fellow and earned his living honestly, fishing off the banks, as half the men do here. Well, they were very happy, had 2 children, and were saving up a bit, when poor Sam and 2 brothers were lost in one of the great storms which now and then make widows and orphans by the dozen. It killed the wife, but Sam's father, who kept the lighthouse here then, took the poor children and supported them for 10 years. The boy was a mere baby, the girl a fine creature, brave like her father, handsome like her mother, and with a good deal of the lady about her, though every one didn't find it out. Ahem! Cried the sharp girl, who began to understand the point of the story now, but would not spoil it, as the others seemed still in the dark, though Miss Scott was smiling, and Captain John staring hard at the old gentleman in the blue silk nightcap. Got a fly in your throat? Asked a neighbor, but Kate only laughed and begged pardon for interrupting. There's not much more, only that affair was rather romantic, and one can't help wondering how the children turned out. Storms seem to have been their doom, for in the terrible one we had 2 winters ago, the old lighthouse keeper had a bad fall on the icy rocks, and if it had not been for the girl, the light would have gone out and more ships been lost on this dangerous point. The keeper's mate had gone ashore and couldn't get back for 2 days, the gale raged so fiercely, but he knew Ben could get on without him, as he had the girl and boy over for a visit. In winter they lived with a friend and went to school at the port. It would have been all right if Ben hadn't broken his ribs. But he was a stout old salt, so he told the girl what to do, and she did it, while the boy waited on the sick man. For 2 days and nights that brave creature lived in the tower, that often rocked as if it would come down, while the sleet and snow dimmed the lantern, and seabirds were beaten to death against the glass. But the light burned steadily, and people said, "All is well," as ships steered away in time, when the clear light warned them of danger, and grateful sailors blessed the hands that kept it burning faithfully. "I hope she got rewarded," cried an eager voice, as the storyteller paused for breath. "I only did my duty, that is reward enough," she said, when some of the rich men at the port heard of it, and sent her money in thanks. She took the money, however, for Ben had to give up the place, being too lame to do the work. He earns his living by fishing now, and puts away most of his pension for the children. He won't last long, and then they must take care of themselves, for the old woman is no relation, and the girl is too proud to hunt up the forgetful English friends, if they have any. But I don't fear for her, a brave lass like that will make her own way anywhere." "Is that all?" asked several voices, as Mr. Wallace leaned back and fanned himself with his hat. "That's all of the first and second parts. The third is yet to come. When I know it, I'll tell you, perhaps next summer, if we meet here again." "Then you know the girl? What is she doing now?" asked Miss Ellery, who had lost a part of the story as she sat in a shadowy nook with the pensive Fred. "We all know her. She is washing a coffee pot at this moment, I believe." And Mr. Wallace pointed to a figure on the beach, energetically shaking a large tin article that shone in the moonlight. "Ruth? Really? How romantic and interesting!" exclaimed Miss Ellery, who was just of the age, as were most of the other girls, to enjoy tales of this sort and imagine sensational denouements. "There is a great deal of untold romance in the lives of these toilers of the sea, and I am sure this good girl will find her reward for the care she takes of the old man and the boy. It costs her something, I've discovered, for she wants an education, and could get it if she left this poor place and lived for herself, but she won't go, and works hard to get money for Grandpa's comfort, instead of buying the books she longs for. I think, young ladies, that there is real heroism in cheerfully selling lilies and frying fish for duty's sake when one longs to be studying, and enjoying a little of the youth that comes but once," said Mr. Wallace. "Oh dear, yes, so nice of her. We might take up a contribution for her when we get home. I'll head the paper with pleasure and give all I can afford, for it must be so horrid to be ignorant at her age. I dare say the poor thing can't even read, just fancy." And Miss Ellery clasped her hands with a sigh of pity. "Very few girls can read fit to be heard nowadays," murmured Miss Scott. "Don't let them affront her with their money, she will fling it in their faces as she did that donkey's dollar. You see to her in your nice, delicate way, auntie, and give her a lift if she will let you," whispered Captain John in the old lady's ear. "Don't waste your pity, Miss Florence. Ruth reads a newspaper better than any woman I ever knew. I've heard her doing it to the old man, getting through shipping news, money market, and politics in fine style. I wouldn't offer her money if I were you, though it is a kind thought. These people have an honest pride in earning things for themselves, and I respect them for it," added Mr. Wallace. "Dear me! I should as soon think of a sand skipper having pride as one of these fishy folks in this stupid little place," observed Mr. Fred, moving his legs into the shadow as the creeping moonlight began to reveal the hideous boots. "Why not? I think they have more to be proud of, these brave, honest, independent people, than many who never earn a cent and swell round on the money their fathers made out of pork, rum, or any other rather unpleasant or disreputable business," said Captain John, with a twinkle in his eye, as he changed the end of his sentence, for the word pickles was on his lips when Aunt Mary's quick touch checked it. Some saucy girl laughed, and Mr. Fred squirmed, for it was well known that his respectable grandfather, whom he never mentioned, had made his large fortune in a pickle factory. "We all rise from the mud in one sense, and all may be handsome flowers if we choose before we go back, after blooming, to ripen our seeds at the bottom of the water where we began," said Miss Scott's refined voice, sounding softly after the masculine ones. "I like that idea. Thank you, Aunt Mary, for giving me such a pretty fancy to add to my love for water-lilies. I shall remember it, and try to be a lovely one, not a bit ashamed to own that I came from honest farmer stock," exclaimed the thoughtful girl who had learned to know and love the sweet, wise woman who was so motherly to all girls. "Here! Here!" cried Captain John, heartily, for he was very proud of his own brave name kept clean and bright through a long line of sailor kin. "Now let us sing, or we shall have no time," suggested Miss Ellery, who warbled as well as rippled, and did not wish to lose this opportunity of singing certain sentimental songs appropriate to the hour. So they tuned their pipes and made music in the air for an hour, to the great delight of Sammy, who joined in every song, and was easily persuaded to give sundry nautical melodies in a shrill small voice which convulsed his hearers with merriment. "Ruth sings awful well, but she won't afore folks," he said, as he paused after a roaring ditty. "She will for me." And Mr. Wallace went slowly up to the rock not far away, where Ruth sat alone listening to the music as she rested after her long day's work. "Such airs," said Miss Ellery in a sharp tone, for her wind of the summer night had not gone well, owing to a too copious supper. "Posing for Lorelei," she added, as Ruth began to sing, glad to oblige the kind old gentleman. They expected some queer ballad or droning hymn, and were surprised when a clear, sweet voice gave them "The Three Fishers" and "Mary on the Sands of Dee," with a simple pathos that made real music lovers thrill with pleasure, and filled several pairs of eyes with tears. "More, please, more!" called Captain John, as she paused, and as if encouraged by the hearty applause her one gift excited, she sang on as easily as a bird till her small store was exhausted. "I call that music," said Miss Scott, as she wiped her eyes with a sigh of satisfaction. "It comes from the heart and goes to the heart, as it should. Now we don't want anything else, and had better go home while the spell lasts." Most of the party followed her example, and went to thank and say good night to Ruth, who felt as rich and happy as a queen with the money Mr. Wallace had slipped into her pocket, and the pleasure which even this short glimpse of a higher, happier life had brought her hungry nature. As the boats floated away, leaving her alone on the shore, she sent her farewell ringing over the water in the words of the old song, "A life on the ocean wave," and every one joined in it with a will, especially Mr. Wallace and Captain John, and so the evening picnic ended tunefully and pleasantly for all, and was long remembered by several. After that day many good times came to Ruth and Sammy, and even poor old Grandpa had his share, finding the last summer of his life very smooth sailing as he slowly drifted into port. It seemed quite natural that Captain John, being a sailor, should like to go and read and yarn with the old fisherman, so no one wondered when he fell into the way of rowing over to the island very often with his pocket full of newspapers, and whiling away the long hours in the little house as full of sea smells and salt breezes as a shell on the shore. Miss Scott also took a fancy to go with her nephew, for, Being an ardent botanist, she discovered that the island possessed many plants which she could not find on the rocky point of land where the hotel and cottages stood. The fresh water pond was her especial delight, and it became a sort of joke to ask, when she came home brown and beaming with her treasures in tin boxes, bottles, and bunches. "Well, Aunt Mary, have you seen the water-lilies bloom yet?" And she always answered with that wise smile of hers, "Not yet, but I'm biding my time, and am watching a very fine one with a special interest. When the right moment comes, it will bloom and show its golden heart to me, I hope." Ruth never quite knew how it came about, but books seemed to find their way to the island and stay there, to her great delight. A demand for lilies sprang up, and when that day was over, marsh rosemary became the rage. Sammy found a market for all the shells and gulls' wings he could furnish, and certain old curiosities brought from many voyages were sold for sums which added many comforts to the old sailor's last cruise. Now the daily road to the point was a pleasure, not a trial, to Ruth, for Mr. Wallace was always ready with a kind word or gift. The ladies nodded as she passed, and asked how the old skipper was today. Miss Scott often told her to stop at the cottage for some new book or a moment's chat on her way to the boat, and Captain John helped Sammy with his fishing so much that the baskets were always full when they came home. All this help and friendliness put a wonderful energy and sweetness into Ruth's hard life, and made her work seem light, her patient waiting for freedom easier to bear cheerfully. She sang as she stood over her washtub, cheered the long nights of watching with the precious books, and found the few moments of rest that came to her when the day's work was done very pleasant, as she sat on her rock, watching the lights from the point, catching the sound of gay music as the young people danced, and thinking over the delightful talks she had with Miss Scott. Perhaps the presence of a blue jacket in Grandpa's little bedroom, the sight of a friendly brown face smiling when she came in, and the sonorous murmur of a man's voice reading aloud, added a charm to the girl's humdrum life. She was too innocent and frank to deny that she enjoyed these new friends, and welcomed both with the same eagerness, saw both go with the same regret, and often wondered how she ever had got on without them. But the modest fisher-maiden never dreamed of any warmer feeling than kindness on the one side and gratitude on the other, and this unconsciousness was her greatest charm, especially to Captain John, who hated coquettes, and shunned the silly girls who wasted time in idle flirtation when they had far better and wholesomer pastimes to enjoy. The handsome sailor was a favorite, being handy at all sorts of fun, and the oldest of the young men at the point. He was very courteous in his hearty way to every woman he met, from the stateliest dowager to the dowdiest waiter-girl, but devoted himself entirely to Aunt Mary, and seemed to have no eyes for younger, fairer faces. "He must have a sweetheart over the sea somewhere," the damsels said among themselves, as they watched him pace the long piazzas alone, or saw him swinging in his hammock with eyes dreamily fixed on the blue bay before him. Miss Scott only smiled when curious questions were asked her, and said she hoped John would find his mate some time, for he deserved the best wife in the world, having been a good son and an honest boy for 26 years. "What is it, Captain, a steamer?" asked Mr. Fred, as he came by the cottage one August afternoon, with his usual escort of girls, all talking at once about some very interesting affair. "Only a sailboat, no steamers today," answered Captain John, dropping the glass from his eye with a start. "Can you see people on the island with that thing? We want to know if Ruth is at home, because if she isn't we can't waste time going over," said Miss Ellery, with her sweetest smile. "I think not. That boat is Sammy's, and as there is a speck of red aboard, I fancy Miss Ruth is with him. They are coming this way, so you can hail them if you like," answered the sailor, with a speck of red on his own sunburnt cheek if anyone had cared to look. "Then we'll wait here if we may. We ordered her to bring us a quantity of bulrushes and flowers for our tableaux tonight, and we want her to be Rebecca at the well. She is so dark, and with her hair down, and gold bangles and scarlet shawls, I think she would do nicely. It takes so long to arrange the Lily Maid of Astolat, we must have an easy one to come just before that, and the boys are wild to make a camel of themselves, so we planned this. Won't you be Jacob or Abraham or whoever the man with the bracelets was?" asked Miss Ellery, as they all settled on the steps in the free and easy way which prevailed at the point. "No, thank you, I don't act. Used to dance hornpipes in my young days, but gave up that sort of thing some time ago. How unfortunate! Everyone acts, it's all the fashion, began Miss Ellery, rolling up her blue eyes imploringly. So I see, but I never cared much for theatricals, I like natural things better. How unkind you are! I quite depended on you for that, since you wouldn't be a corsair. Fred's the man for such fun. He's going to startle the crowd with a regular Captain Kidd rig, pistols and cutlasses enough for a whole crew, and a terrific beard. I know Ruth won't do it, Floss, for she looked amazed when I showed her my Undine costume, and told her what I wanted the seaweed for. Why, you won't stand before all those folks dressed that way, will you? She said, as much scandalized as if she'd never seen a low-necked dress and silk stockings before. And Miss Perry tossed her head with an air of pity for a girl who could be surprised at the display of a pretty neck and arms and ankles. We'll hire her, then. She's a mercenary wretch and will do anything for money. I won't be scrambled into my boat in a hurry, and we must have Rebecca because I've borrowed a fine pitcher and promised the boys their camel, said Miss Ellery, who considered herself the queen of the place and ruled like one, in virtue of being the prettiest girl there, and the richest. She has landed, I think, for the boat is off again to the wharf. Better run down and help her with the bulrushes, Fred, and the rest of the stuff you ordered, suggested Captain John, longing to go himself but kept by his duty as host, and Mary being asleep upstairs. Too tired. Won't hurt her, she's used to work, and we mustn't pamper her up, as old ladies say, answered Mr. Fred, enjoying his favorite lounge on the grass. I wouldn't ask her to act, if you'll allow me to say so, said Captain John, in his quiet way. That sort of thing might unsettle her and make her discontented. She steers that little craft over there and is happy now. Let her shape her own course, and remember it isn't well to talk to the man at the wheel. Miss Perry stared. Miss Ray, the sharp girl, nodded, and Miss Ellery said petulantly, as if it mattered what she thought or said or did. It's her place to be useful if we want her, and we needn't worry about spoiling a girl like that. She can't be any prouder or more saucy than she is, and I shall ask her if only to see the airs she will put on. As she spoke, Ruth came up the sandy path from the beach laden with rushes and weeds, sunflowers and shells, looking warm and tired but more picturesque than ever, in her blue gown and the red handkerchief she wore since her old hat blew away. Seeing the party on the cottage steps, she stopped to ask if the things were right, and Miss Ellery at once made her request in a commanding tone which caused Ruth to grow very straight and cool and sober all at once, and answered decidedly, I couldn't anyway. Why not? Well, one reason is I don't think it's right to act things out of the Bible just to show off and amuse folks. The idea of minding! And Miss Ellery frowned, adding angrily, we will pay you for it. I find people will do anything for money down here. We are poor and need it, and this is our best time to make it. I'd do most anything to earn a little, but not that. And Ruth looked as proud as the young lady herself. Then we'll say no more if you are too elegant to do what we don't mind at all. I'll pay you for this stuff now, as I ordered it, and you needn't bring me any more. How much do I owe you? Asked the offended beauty, taking out her purse in a pet. Nothing. I'm glad to oblige the ladies if I can, for they have been very kind to me. Perhaps if you knew why I want to earn money, you'd understand me better. Grandpa can't last long, and I don't want the town to bury him. I'm working and saving so he can be buried decently, as he wants to be, not like a pauper. There was something in Ruth's face and voice as she said this, standing there shabby, tired, and heavy-laden, yet honest, dutiful and patient for love's sake, that touched the hearts of those who looked and listened. But she left no time for any answer, for with the last word she went on quickly, as if to hide the tears that dimmed her clear eyes and the quiver of her lips. Floss, how could you? Cried Miss Ray, and ran to take the sheaf of bulrushes from Ruth's arms, followed by the rest, all ashamed and repentant now that a word had shown them the hard life going on beside their idle, carefree ones. Captain John longed to follow, but walked into the house, growling to himself with a grim look. That girl has no more heart than a butterfly, and I'd like to see her squirm on a pin. Poor Ruth! We'll settle that matter, and bury old Ben like an admiral. Hang me if we don't! He was so busy talking the affair over with Aunt Mary that he did not see the girl flit by to wait for her boat on the beach, having steadily refused the money offered her, though she accepted the apologies in the kindest spirit. The beach at this hour of the day was left to the nurses and maids who bathed and gossiped while the little people played in the sand or paddled in the sea. Several were splashing about, and one German governess was scolding violently because while she was in the bathhouse her charge, a little girl of 6, had rashly ventured out in a flat-bottomed tub, as they called the small boats, used by the gentlemen to reach the yachts anchored in deep water. Ruth saw the child's danger at a glance, for the tide was going out, carrying the frail cockleshell rapidly away, while the child risked an upset every moment by stretching her arms to the women on the shore and calling them to help her. None dared to try, but all stood and wrung their hands, screaming like seagulls, till the girl, throwing off shoes and heavy skirt, plunged in, calling cheerily, "Sit still! I'll come and get you, Millie!" She could swim like a fish, but encumbered with her clothes and weary with an unusually hard day's work, she soon found that she did not gain as rapidly as she expected upon the receding boat. She did not lose courage, but a thrill of anxiety shot through her as she felt her breath grow short, her limbs heavy, and the tide sweep her farther and farther from the shore. If they would only stop screaming and go for help, I could keep up and push the boat in. But the child will be out presently, and then we are lost, for I can't get back with her, I'm afraid. As these thoughts passed through her mind, Ruth was swimming stoutly, and trying by cheerful words to keep the frightened child from risking their main chance of safety. A few more strokes and she would reach the boat, rest a moment, then, clinging to it, push it leisurely to shore. Feeling that the danger was over, she hurried on and was just putting up her hands to seize the frail raft and get her breath when Millie, thinking she was to be taken in her arms, leaned forward. In rushed the water, down went the boat, and out splashed the screaming child to cling to Ruth with the desperate clutch she dreaded. Both went under for a moment, but rose again, and with all her wits sharpened by the peril of the moment, Ruth cried, as she kept herself afloat, "On my back, quick! Quick! Don't touch my arms, hold tight to my hair, and keep still." Not realizing all the danger, and full of faith in Ruth's power to do anything, after the feats of diving and floating she had seen her perform, Millie scrambled up as often before, and clung spluttering and gasping to Ruth's strong shoulders. So burdened, and conscious of fast failing strength, Ruth turned toward the shore, and bent every power of mind and body to her task. How far away it seemed! How still the women were, not one even venturing out a little way to help her, and no man in sight! Her heart seemed to stop beating, her temples throbbed, her breath was checked by the clinging arms, and the child seemed to grow heavier every moment. "I'll do what I can, but oh, why don't someone come?" That was the last thought Ruth was conscious of, as she panted and plowed slowly back, with such a set white face and wide eyes fixed on the flag that fluttered from the nearest cottage, that it was no wonder the women grew still as they watched her. One good Catholic nurse fell on her knees to pray, the maids cried, the governess murmured, "Mein Gott, I am lost if the child go drowned!" And clear and sweet came the sound of Captain John's whistle as he stood on his piazza waiting to row Ruth home. They were nearly in, a few more strokes and she could touch the bottom, when suddenly all grew black before her eyes, and whispering, "I'll float! Call Millie and don't mind me!" Ruth turned over, still holding the child fast, and with nothing but her face out of water, feebly struggled on. "Come and get me! She's going down! Oh, come, quick!" called the child in a tone of such distress that the selfish German bestirred herself at last, and began to wade cautiously in. Seeing help at hand, brave little Millie soon let go, and struck out like an energetic young frog, while Ruth, quite spent, sank quietly down, with the dim sense that her last duty was done and rest had come. The shrill cries of the women when they saw the steady white face disappear and rise no more, reached Captain John's ear, and sent him flying down the path, sure that someone was in danger. "Ruth, gone down, out there!" was all he caught, as many voices tried to tell the tale, and waiting for no more, he threw off hat and coat, and dashed into the sea as if ready to search the Atlantic till he found her. She was safe in a moment, and pausing only to send one girl flying for the doctor, he carried his streaming burden straight home to Aunt Mary, who had her between blankets before a soul arrived, and was rubbing for dear life while John fired up the spirit lamp for hot brandy and water, with hands that trembled as he splashed about like an agitated Newfoundland fresh from a swim. Ruth was soon conscious, but too much exhausted to do or say anything, and lay quietly suffering the discomforts of resuscitation till she fell asleep. "Is Millie safe?" was all she asked, and being assured that the child was in her mother's arms, and Sammy had gone to tell Grandpa all about it, she smiled and shut her eyes with a whispered, "Then it's all right, thank God!" All that evening Captain John paced the piazza, and warned away the eager callers, who flocked down to ask about the heroine of the hour, for she was more interesting than Undine, the Lily Maid, or any of the pretty creatures attitudinizing behind the red curtains in the hot hotel parlor. All that night Aunt Mary watched the deep sleep that restored the girl, and now and then crept out to tell her nephew there was nothing to fear for one so strong and healthful. And all night Ruth dreamed strange dreams, some weird and dim, some full of pain and fear. But as the fever of reaction passed away, lovely visions of a happy place came to her, where faces she loved were near, and rest, and all she longed for was hers at last. So clear and beautiful was this dream that she waked in the early dawn to lie and think of it, with such a look of peace upon her face that Aunt Mary could not but kiss it tenderly when she came in to see if all was well. "How are you, dear? Has this nice long sleep set you up again as I hoped?" "Oh yes, I'm quite well, thank you, and I must go home. Grandpa will worry so till he sees me," answered Ruth, sitting up with her wet hair on her shoulders, and a little shiver of pain as she stretched her tired arms. "Not yet, my dear. Rest another hour or two and have some breakfast. Then, if you like, John shall take you home before anyone comes to plague you with idle questions. I'm not going to say a word, except that I'm proud of my brave girl, and mean to take care of her if she will let me." With that and a motherly embrace, the old lady bustled away to stir up her maid and wake John from his first nap with the smell of coffee, a most unromantic but satisfying perfume to all the weary watchers in the house. An hour later, dressed in Miss Scott's gray wrapper and rose-colored shawl, Ruth came slowly to the beach leaning on Captain John's arm, while Aunt Mary waved her napkin from the rocks above, and sent kind messages after them as they pushed off. It was the loveliest hour of all the day. The sun had not yet risen, but sea and sky were rosy with the flush of dawn, the small waves rippled up the sand, the wind blew fresh and fragrant from hayfields far away, and in the grove the birds were singing, as they only sing at peep of day. A still, soft, happy time before the work and worry of the world began, the peaceful moment which is so precious to those who have learned to love its balm and consecrate its beauty with their prayers. Ruth sat silent, looking about her as if she saw a new heaven and earth, and had no words in which to tell the feeling that made her eyes so soft, sent the fresh color back into her cheeks, and touched her lips with something sweeter than a smile. Captain John rowed very slowly, watching her with a new expression in his face, and when she drew a long breath, a happy sort of sigh, he leaned forward to ask, as if he knew what brought it, "You are glad to be alive, Ruth?" "Oh, so glad! I didn't want to die. Life's very pleasant now," she answered, with her frank eyes meeting his so gratefully. "Even though it's hard? It's easier lately. You and dear Miss Mary have helped so much. I see my way clear, and mean to go right on, real brave and cheerful. Sure I'll get my wish at last." "So do I." And Captain John laughed a queer, happy laugh, as he bent to his oars again, with the look of a man who knew where he was going and longed to get there as soon as possible. "I hope you will. I wish I could help anyway to pay for all you've done for me. I know you don't want to be thanked for fishing me up, but I mean to do it all the same if I can sometime." And Ruth's voice was full of tender energy as she looked down into the deep green water where her life would have ended but for him. "What did you think of when you went down so quietly? Those women said you never called for help once. I had no breath to call. I knew you were near, I hoped you'd come, and I thought of poor Grandpa and Sammy as I gave up and seemed to go to sleep." A very simple answer, but it made Captain John beam with delight, and the morning red seemed to glow all over his brown face as he rowed across the quiet bay, looking at Ruth sitting opposite, so changed by the soft becoming colors of her dress, the late danger, and the dreams that still lingered in her mind, making it hard to feel that she was the same girl who went that way only a day ago. Presently the captain spoke again in a tone that was both eager and anxious. "I'm glad my idle summer hasn't been quite wasted. It's over now, and I'm off in a few days for a year's cruise, you know. Yes, Miss Mary told me you were going soon. I'll miss you both, but maybe you'll come next year?" "I will, please God." "So will I, for even if I get away this fall, I'd love to come again in summer and rest a little while, no matter what I find to do. Come and stay with Aunt Mary if this home is gone. I shall want Sammy next time. I've settled that with the skipper, you know, and I'll take good care of the little chap. He's not much younger than I was when I shipped for my first voyage." "You'll let him go?" "Anywhere with you. He's set his heart on being a sailor, and Grandpa likes it. All our men are, and I'd be one if I were a boy. I love the sea so, I couldn't be happy long away from it." "Even though it nearly drowned you?" "Yes, I'd rather die that way than any other. But it was my fault. I shouldn't have failed if I hadn't been so tired. I've often swum farther, but I'd been 3 hours in the marsh getting those things for the girls, and it was washing day, and I'd been up nearly all night with Grandpa, so don't blame the sea, please, Captain John." "You should have called me. I was waiting for you, Ruth." "I didn't know it. I'm used to doing things myself. It might have been too late for Millie if I'd waited. Thank God I wasn't too late for you." The boat was at the shore now, and as he spoke Captain John held out his hands to help Ruth down, for, encumbered with her long dress, and still weak from past suffering, she could not spring to land as she used to do in her short gown. For the first time the color deepened in her cheek as she looked into the face before her and read the meaning of the eyes that found her beautiful and dear, and the lips that thanked God for her salvation so fervently. She did not speak, but let him lift her down, draw her hand through his arm, and lead her up the rocky slope to the little pool that lay waiting for the sun's first rays to wake from its sleep. He paused there, and with his hand on hers said quietly, "Ruth, before I go I want to tell you something, and this is a good time and place. While Aunt Mary watched the flowers, I've watched you, and found the girl I've always wanted for my wife. Modest and brave, dutiful and true, that's what I love. Could you give me all this, dear, for the little I can offer, and next year sail with Sammy and a very happy man if you say yes? I'm not half good and wise enough for that. Remember what I am," began Ruth, bending her head as if the thought were more than she could bear. "I do remember, and I'm proud of it. Why, dear heart, I've worked my way up from a common sailor, and am the better for it. Now I've got my ship, and I want a mate to make a home for me aboard and ashore. Look up and tell me that I didn't read those true eyes wrong." Then Ruth lifted up her face, and the sunshine showed him all he asked to know, as she answered with her heart in her voice and the true eyes fixed on his. "I tried not to love you, knowing what a poor ignorant girl I am, but you were so kind to me, how could I help it, John?" That satisfied him, and he sealed his happy thanks on the innocent lips none had kissed but the little brother, the old man, and the fresh winds of the sea. One can imagine the welcome they met at the small brown house, and what went on inside as Grandpa blessed the lovers, and Sammy so overflowed with joy at his enchanting prospects, that he was obliged to vent his feelings in ecstatic jigs upon the beach, to the great amazement of the gulls and sandpipers at breakfast there. No one at the Point, except a certain dear old lady, knew the pleasant secret, though many curious or friendly visitors went to the island that day to see the heroine and express their wonder, thanks, and admiration. All agreed that partial drowning seemed to suit the girl, for a new Ruth had risen like Venus from the sea. A softer beauty was in her fresh face now, a gentler sort of pride possessed her, and a still more modest shrinking from praise and publicity became her will. No one guessed the cause, and she was soon forgotten, for the season was over, the summer guests departed, and the Point was left to the few cottagers who loved to linger into golden September. Miss Mary was one of these, and Captain John another, for he remained as long as he dared, to make things comfortable for the old man, and to sit among the rocks with Ruth when her day's work was done, listening while his Mermaid, as he called her, sang as she had never sung before, and let him read the heart he had made his own, for the lily was wide open now, and its gold all his. With the first frosts Grandpa died, and was carried to his grave by his old comrades, owing no man a cent, thanks to his dutiful granddaughter and the new son she had given him. Then the little house was deserted, and all winter Ruth was happy with Aunt Mary, while Sammy studied bravely, and lived on dreams of the joys in store for him when the captain came sailing home again. Another summer brought the happy day when the little brown house was set in order for a sailor's honeymoon, when the flag floated gaily over Miss Mary's cottage, and Ruth, in a white gown with her chosen flowers in her hair and bosom, shipped with her dear captain for the long cruise which had its storms and calms, but never any shipwreck of the love that grew and blossomed with the water-lilies by the sea. Poppies and wheat. As the great steamer swung round into the stream, the cloud of white handkerchiefs waving on the wharf melted away, the last goodbyes grew fainter, and those who went and those who stayed felt that the parting was over. It may be for years, and it may be forever, as the song says. With only one of the many groups on the deck need we concern ourselves, and a few words will introduce our fellow travelers. A brisk middle-aged lady leaned on the arm of a middle-aged gentleman in spectacles, both wearing the calmly cheerful air of people used to such scenes, and conscious only of the relief change of place brings to active minds and busy lives. Before them stood two girls, evidently their charges, and as evidently not sisters, for in all respects they were a great contrast. The younger was a gay creature of 17, in an effective costume of navy blue and white, with bright hair blowing in the wind, sparkling eyes roving everywhere, lively tongue going, and an air of girlish excitement pleasant to see. Both hands were full of farewell bouquets, which she surveyed with more pride than tenderness as she glanced at another group of girls less blessed with floral offerings. Her companion was a small, quiet person, some years older than herself, very simply dressed, laden with wraps, and apparently conscious just then of nothing but 3 dark specks on the wharf, as she still waved her little white flag, and looked shoreward with eyes too dim for seeing. A sweet, modest face it was, with intelligent eyes, a firm mouth, and the look of one who had early learned self-reliance and self-control. The lady and gentleman watched the pair with interest and amusement, for both liked young people, and were anxious to know these two better, since they were to be their guides and guardians for 6 months. Professor Homer was going abroad to look up certain important facts for his great historical work, and as usual took his wife with him, for they had no family, and the good lady was ready to march to any quarter of the globe at short notice. Fearing to be lonely while her husband pored over old papers in foreign libraries, Mrs. Homer had invited Ethel Amory, a friend's daughter, to accompany her. Of course the invitation was gladly accepted, for it was a rare opportunity to travel in such company, and Ethel was wild with delight at the idea. One thorn, however, vexed her, among the roses with which her way seemed strewn. Mamma would not let her take a French maid, but preferred a young lady as companion, for, 3 being an awkward number, a 4th party would be not only convenient, but necessary on the girl's account, since she was not used to take care of herself and Mrs. Homer could only be expected to act as chaperone. Jane Bassett is just the person I want, and Jane shall go. She needs a change after teaching all these years. It will do her a world of good, for she will improve and enjoy every moment, and the salary I shall offer her will make it worth her while," said Mrs. Amory, as she discussed the plan with her daughter. "She is only 3 years older than I am, and I hate to be taken care of, and watched, and fussed over. I can order a maid round, but a companion is worse than a governess. Such people are always sensitive and proud, and hard to get on with. Everyone takes a maid, and I'd set my heart on that nice Marie who wants to go home, and talk such lovely French. Do let me have her, Mamma!" begged Ethel, who was a spoiled child and usually got her own way. But for once Mamma stood firm, having a strong desire to benefit her daughter by the society of better companions than the gay girls of her own set, also to give a great pleasure to good little Jane Bassett, who had been governessing ever since she was 16, with very few vacations in her hard, dutiful life. "No, darling, I have asked Jane, and if her mother can spare her, Jane it shall be. She is just what you need, sensible and kind, intelligent and capable, not ashamed to do anything for you, and able to teach you a great deal in a pleasant way. Mrs. Homer approves of her, and I am sure you will be glad by and by, for traveling is not all fun, as you expect, and I don't want you to be a burden on our friends. You two young things can take care of each other while the professor and his wife are busy with their own affairs, and Jane is a far better companion for you than that coquettish Frenchwoman, who will probably leave you in the lurch as soon as you reach Paris. I shouldn't have a moment's peace if you were left with her, but I have entire confidence in Jane Bassett because she is faithful, discreet, and a true lady in all things. There was no more to be said, and Ethel pouted in vain. Jane accepted the place with joy, and after a month of delightful hurry they were off, one all eagerness for the new world, the other full of tender regret for the dear souls left behind. How they got on, and what they learned, remains to be told. Come, Miss Bassett, we can't see them any longer, so we may as well begin to enjoy ourselves. You might take those things down below, and settle the stateroom a bit. I'm going to walk about and get my bearings before lunch. You will find me somewhere round. Ethel spoke with a little tone of command, having made up her mind to be mistress, and keep Jane Bassett in her place, though she did know 3 languages and sketched much better than Miss Amory. Jenny, as we who are going to be her bosom friends will call her, nodded cheerfully, and looked about for the stairway, for, never having been on a steamer before, she was rather bewildered. I'll show you the way, my dear. I always get my things settled at once, as one never knows when one may have to turn in. The professor will go with you, Ethel. It is not proper for you to roam about alone. And with that hint Mrs. Homer led the way below, privately wondering how these young persons were going to get on together. Jane swallowed her Heimweh in silence, and bestirred herself so well that soon the stateroom looked very cozy with the wrappers laid ready, the hanging bags tacked up, and all made shipshape for the 10 days' trip. But where are your comforts? You have given Ethel all the room, the lower berth, and the best of everything, said Mrs. Homer, popping in her head to see how her quiet neighbor got on. Oh, I live in my trunk. I didn't bring half as many little luxuries as Ethel did, so I don't need as much room. I'm used to living in corners like a mouse, and I get on very well, answered Jane, looking very like a mouse just then, as she peeped out of the upper berth, with her gray gown, bright eyes, and quick nod of contentment. Well, my dear, I've just one word of advice to give you. Don't let that child tyrannize over you. She means well, but is wilful and thoughtless, and it is not your duty to be made a slave of. Assert yourself, and she will obey and respect you, and you will help her a great deal. I know all about it. I was a companion in my youth, and had a hard time of it till I revolted and took my proper place. Now let us go up and enjoy the fine air while we can. Thank you, I will remember. And Jane offered the good lady her arm, with a feeling of gratitude for such friendliness, all being new and strange to her, and many doubts of her own fitness for the position lying heavy at her heart. But soon all was forgotten as she sat on deck watching the islands, lighthouses, ships, and shores glide by as she went swiftly out to sea that bright June day. Here was the long-cherished desire of her life come to pass at last, and now the parting with mother and sisters was over, nothing but pleasure remained, and a very earnest purpose to improve this unexpected opportunity to the uttermost. The cares of life had begun early for little Jane, she being the eldest of the 3 girls, and her mother a widow. First came hard study, then a timid beginning as nursery governess, and as year by year the teaching of others taught her, she ventured on till here she was companion to a fine young lady. Going abroad, where every facility for acquiring languages, studying history, seeing the best pictures, and enjoying good society would all be hers. No wonder the quiet face under the modest gray hat beamed, as it turned wistfully toward the unknown world before her, and that her thoughts were so far away, she was quite unconscious of the kind eyes watching her, as Mrs. Homer sat placidly knitting beside her. I shall like the mouse, I'm quite sure. Hope Lemuel will be as well satisfied. Ethel is charming when she chooses, but will need looking after, that's plain, thought the lady as she glanced down the deck to where her husband stood talking with several gentlemen, while his charge was already making friends with the gay girls who were to be her fellow passengers. Daisy Millers, I fear, went on Mrs. Homer, who had a keen eye for character, and was as fond of studying the people about her as the professor was of looking up dead statesmen, kings, and warriors. The young ladies certainly bore some resemblance to the type of American girl which one never fails to meet in traveling. They were dressed in the height of the fashion, pretty with the delicate evanescent beauty of too many of our girls, and all gifted with the loud voices, shrill laughter, and free and easy manners which so astonish decorous English matrons and maids. Ethel was evidently impressed with their style, as they had a man and maid at their beck and call, and every sign of ostentatious wealth about them. A stout papa, a thin mamma, evidently worn out with the cares of the past winter, 3 half-grown girls, and a lad of 16 made up the party, and a very lively one it was, as the professor soon found, for he presently bowed himself away, and left Ethel to her new friends, since she smilingly refused to leave them. "Ought I to go to her?" asked Jenny, waking from her happy reverie to a sudden sense of duty as the gentleman sat down beside her. "Oh dear, no, she is all right. Those are the Sibleys of New York. Her father knows them, and she will find them a congenial refuge when she tires of us quiet folk, and you too, perhaps?" added the professor as he glanced at the girl. "I think not. I should not be welcome to them, nor are they the sort of people I like. I shall be very happy with the quiet folk, if they won't let me be in the way," answered Jenny, in the cheerful voice that reminded one of the chirp of a robin. "We won't. We'll toss you overboard as soon as you begin to scream and bounce in that style," he answered, laughing at the idea of this demure young person's ever dreaming of such a thing. Jenny laughed also, and ran to pick up Mrs. Homer's ball, as it set out for a roll into the lee scuppers. As she brought it back, she found the professor examining the book she left behind her. "Like all young travelers, you cling to your Baedeker, I see, even in the first excitement of the start. He is a useful fellow, but I know my Europe so well now, I don't need him. I thought it would be wise to read up our route a little, then I needn't ask questions. They must be very tiresome to people who know all about it," said Jenny, regarding him with an expression of deep respect, for she considered him a sort of walking encyclopedia of universal knowledge. It pleased the learned man, who was kindly as well as wise, and loved to let his knowledge overflow into any thirsty mind, however small the cup might be. He liked the intelligent face before him, and a timid question or two set him off on his favorite hobby at a pleasant amble, with Jenny on the pillion behind, as it were. She enjoyed it immensely, and was deep in French history, when the lunch gong recalled her from Francis I. and his sister Margaret to chops and English ale. Ethel came prancing back to her own party, full of praises of the Sibleys, and the fun they meant to have together. "They are going to the Langham, so we shall be able to go about with them, and they know all the best shops, and some lords and ladies, and expect to be in Paris when we are, and that will be a great help with our dresses and things. But we are not going to shop and have new dresses till we are on our way home, you know. Now we haven't time for such things, and can't trouble the Homers with more trunks," answered Jenny, as they followed their elders to the table. "I shall buy what I like, and have 10 trunks if it suits me. I'm not going to poke round over old books and ruins, and live in a traveling dress all the time. You can do as you like, it's different with me, and I know what is proper." With which naughty speech Ethel took her seat first at the table, and began to nod and smile at the Sibleys opposite. Jenny set her lips and made no answer, but ate her lunch with what appetite she could, trying to forget her troubles and listening to the chat going on around her. All that afternoon Ethel left her to herself, and enjoyed the more congenial society of the new acquaintances. Jenny was tired, and glad to read and dream in the comfortable seat Mrs. Homer left her when she went for her nap. By sunset the sea grew rough and people began to vanish below. There were many empty places at dinner time, and those who appeared seemed to have lost their appetites suddenly. The Homers were good sailors, but Jenny looked pale, and Ethel said her head ached, though both kept up bravely till 9 o'clock, when the Sibleys precipitately retired after supper, and Ethel thought she might as well go to bed early to be ready for another pleasant day tomorrow. Jenny had a bad night, but disturbed no one. Ethel slept soundly, and sprang up in the morning, eager to be the first on deck. But a sudden lurch sent her and her hairbrush into a corner, and when she rose, everything in the stateroom seemed to be turning somersaults, while a deathly faintness crept over her. "Oh, wake up, Jane! We are sinking! What is it? Help me, help me!" And with a dismal wail Ethel tumbled into her berth in the first anguish of seasickness. We will draw the curtain for 3 days, during which rough weather and general despair reigned. Mrs. Homer took care of the girls till Jenny was able to sit up and amuse Ethel, but the latter had a hard time of it, for a series of farewell lunches had left her in a bad state for a sea voyage, and the poor girl could not lift her head for days. The new-made friends did not trouble themselves about her after a call of condolence, but faithful Jenny sat by her hour after hour, reading and talking by day, singing her to sleep at night, and often creeping from her bed on the sofa to light her little candle and see that her charge was warmly covered and quite comfortable. Ethel was used to being petted, so she was not very grateful, but she felt the watchful care about her, and thought Jane almost as handy a person as a maid, and told her so. Jenny thanked her and said nothing of her own discomforts, but Mrs. Homer saw them, and wrote to Mrs. Amory that so far the companion was doing admirably and all that could be desired. A few days later she added more commendations to the journal letters she kept for the anxious mothers at home, and this serious comical event was the cause of her fresh praises. The occupants of the deck staterooms were wakened in the middle of the night by a crash and a cry, and starting up found that the engines were still, and something was evidently the matter somewhere. A momentary panic took place. Ladies screamed, children cried, and gentlemen in queer costumes burst out of their rooms, excitedly demanding, "What is the matter?" As no lamps are allowed in the rooms at night, darkness added to the alarm, and it was some time before the real state of the case was known. Mrs. Homer went at once to the frightened girls, and found Ethel clinging to Jenny, who was trying to find the light preservers lashed to the wall. "We've struck! Don't leave me! Let us die together! Oh, why did I come? Why did I come?" she wailed, while the other girl answered with a brave attempt at cheerfulness, as she put over Ethel's head the only light preserver she could find. "I will! I will! Be calm, dear! I guess there is no immediate danger. Hold fast to this while I try to find something warm for you to put on." In a moment Jenny's candle shone like a star of hope in the gloom, and by the time the three had got into wrappers and shawls, a peal of laughter from the professor assured them that the danger could not be great. Other sounds of merriment, as well as Mrs. Sibley's voice scolding violently, was heard, and presently Mr. Homer came to tell them to be calm, for the stoppage was only to cool the engines, and the noise was occasioned by Joe Sibley's tumbling out of his berth in a fit of nightmare caused by Welsh rarebits and poached eggs at 11 at night. Much relieved, and a little ashamed now of their fright, every one subsided, but Ethel could not sleep, and clung to Jenny in an hysterical state till a soft voice began to sing, "Abide with me," so sweetly that more than one agitated listener blessed the singer, and fell asleep before the comforting hymn ended. Ethel was up next day, and lay on the professor's bearskin rug on deck, looking pale and interesting, while the Sibleys sat by her talking over the exciting event of the night, to poor Joe's great disgust. Jenny crept to her usual corner and sat with a book on her lap, quietly reviving in the fresh air till she was able to enjoy the pleasant chat of the Homers, who established themselves near by and took care of her, learning each day to love and respect the faithful little soul who kept her worries to herself, and looked brightly forward no matter how black the sky might be. Only one other incident of the voyage need be told, but as that marked a change in the relations between the two girls it is worth recording. As she prepared for bed late one evening, Mrs. Homer heard Jenny say in a tone never used before, "My dear, I must say something to you or I shall not feel as if I were doing my duty. I promised your mother that you should keep early hours, as you are not very strong and excitement is bad for you. Now you won't come to bed at 10, as I ask you to every night, but stay up playing cards or sitting on deck till nearly every one but the Sibleys is gone. Mrs. Homer waits for us, and is tired, and it is very rude to keep her up. Will you please do as you ought, and not oblige me to say you must? Ethel was sleepy and cross, and answered pettishly, as she held out her foot to have her boot unbuttoned, for Jenny, anxious to please, refused no service asked of her. I shall do as I like, and you and Mrs. Homer needn't trouble yourselves about me. Mamma wished me to have a good time, and I shall. There is no harm in staying up to enjoy the moonlight, and sing and tell stories. Mrs. Sibley knows what is proper better than you do. I don't think she does, for she goes to bed and leaves the girls to flirt with those officers in a way that I know is not proper," answered Jenny firmly. "I should be very sorry to hear them say of you as they did of the Sibley girls. They are a wild lot, but great fun." "Did they say that? How impertinent!" And Ethel bridled up like a ruffled chicken, for she was not out yet, and had not lost the modest instincts that so soon get blunted when a frivolous fashionable life begins. "I heard them, and I know that the well-bred people on board do not like the Sibleys' noisy ways and bad manners. Now you, my dear, are young and unused to this sort of life, so you cannot be too careful what you say and do, and with whom you go. Good gracious! Any one would think you were as wise as Solomon and as old as the hills. You are young, and you haven't traveled, and don't know any more of the world than I do, not so much of some things, so you needn't preach. I'm not wise nor old, but I do know more of the world than you, for I began to take care of myself and earn my living at 16, and 4 years of hard work have taught me a great deal. I am to watch over you, and I intend to do it faithfully, no matter what you say, nor how hard you make it for me, because I promised, and I shall keep my word. We are not to trouble Mrs. Homer with our little worries, but try to help each other and have a really good time. I will do anything for you that I can, but I shall not let you do things which I wouldn't allow my own sisters to do, and if you refuse to mind me, I shall write to your mother and ask to go home. My conscience won't let me take money and pleasure unless I earn them and do my duty." "Well, upon my word," cried Ethel, much impressed by such a decided speech from gentle Jane, and dismayed at the idea of being taken home in disgrace. "We won't talk any more now, because we may get angry and say what we should be sorry for. I am sure you will see that I am right when you think it over quietly. So good night, dear." "Good night," was all the reply Ethel gave, and a long silence followed. Mrs. Homer could not help hearing as the staterooms were close together, and the well-ventilated doors made all conversation beyond a whisper audible. "I didn't think Jane had the spirit to talk like that. She has taken my hint and asserted herself, and I'm very glad, for Ethel must be set right at once or we shall have no peace. She will respect and obey Jane after this, or I shall be obliged to say my word." Mrs. Homer was right, and before her first nap set in she heard a meek voice say, "Are you asleep, Miss Bassett?" "No, dear." "Then I want to say, I've thought it over. Please don't write to Mamma. I'll be good. I'm sorry I was rude to you, do forgive." The sentence was not ended, for a sudden rustle, a little sob, and several hearty kisses plainly told that Jenny had flown to pardon, comfort, and caress her naughty child, and that all was well. After that Ethel's behavior was painfully decorous for the rest of the voyage, which, fortunately for her good resolutions, ended at Queenstown, much to her regret. The Homers thought a glimpse at Ireland and Scotland would be good for the girls, and as the professor had business in Edinburgh this was the better route for all parties. But Ethel longed for London, and refused to see any beauty in the lakes of Killarney, turned up her nose at jaunting cars, and pronounced Dublin a stupid place. Scotland suited her better, and she could not help enjoying the fine scenery with such companions as the Homers, for the professor knew all about the relics and ruins, and his wife had a memory richly stored with the legends, poetry, and romance which make dull facts memorable and history enchanting. But Jenny's quiet rapture was pleasant to behold. She had not scorned Scott's novels as old-fashioned, and she peopled the cottages and castles with his heroes and heroines. She crooned Burns's sweet songs to herself as she visited his haunts, and went about in a happy sort of dream, with her head full of Highland Mary, Tam O'Shanter, field mice and daisies, or fought terrific battles with Fitzjames and Marmion, and tried if the light harebell would raise its head, elastic from her airy tread, as it did from the Lady of the Lake's famous foot. Ethel told her she was clean daft. But Jenny said, "Let me enjoy it while I can. I've dreamed of it so long I can hardly realize that it has come, and I cannot lose a minute of it." So she absorbed Scotch poetry and romance with the mist and the keen air from the moors, and bloomed like the bonny heather which she loved to wear. "What shall we do this rainy day in this stupid place?" said Ethel, one morning when bad weather kept them from an excursion to Stirling Castle. "Write our journals and read up for the visit, then we shall know all about the castle, and need not tire people with our questions," answered Jenny, already established in a deep window seat of their parlor at the hotel with her books and portfolio. "I don't keep a journal, and I hate to read guidebooks. It's much easier to ask, though there is very little I care for about these moldy old places," said Ethel with a yawn, as she looked out into the muddy street. "How can you say so? Don't you care for poor Mary, and Prince Charlie, and all the other sad and romantic memories that haunt the country? Why, it seems as real to me as if it happened yesterday, and I never can forget anything about the place or the people now. Really, dear, I think you ought to take more interest and improve this fine chance. Just see how helpful and lovely Mrs. Homer is, with a quotation for every famous spot we see. It adds so much to our pleasure, and makes her so interesting. I'm going to learn some of the fine bits in this book of hers, and make them my own, since I cannot buy the beautiful little set this Burns belongs to. Don't you want to try it, and while away the dull day by hearing each other recite and talking over the beautiful places we have seen? No, thank you, no study for me. It is to be all play now. Why tire my wits with that Scotch stuff when Mrs. Homer is here to do it for me?" And lazy Ethel turned to the papers on the table for amusement more to her taste. "But we shouldn't think only of our own pleasure, you know. It is so sweet to be able to teach, amuse, or help others in any way. I'm glad to learn this new accomplishment, so that I may be to someone by and by what dear Mrs. Homer is to us now, if I ever can. Didn't you see how charmed those English people were at Holyrood when she was reciting those fine lines to us? The old gentleman bowed and thanked her, and the handsome lady called her a book of elegant extracts. I thought it was such a pretty and pleasant thing that I described it all to Mother and the girls." "So it was, but did you know that the party was Lord Cumberland and his family? The guide told me afterward. I never guessed they were anybody, in such plain tweed gowns and thick boots, did you? I knew they were ladies and gentlemen by their manners and conversation. Did you expect they would travel in coronets and ermine mantles?" laughed Jenny. "I'm not such a goose. But I'm glad we met them, because I can tell the Sibleys of it. They think so much of titles, and brag about Lady What's Berkeley, whose husband is only a brewer knighted. I shall buy a plaid like the one the Lord's daughter wore, and wave it in the faces of those girls. They do put on such airs because they have been in Europe before." Jenny was soon absorbed in her books, so Ethel curled herself up in the window seat with an illustrated London paper full of some royal event, and silence reigned for an hour. Neither had seen the professor's glasses rise like two full moons above his paper now and then to peep at them as they chatted at the other end of the room. Either saw him smile as he made a memorandum in his notebook, nor guessed how pleased he was at Jenny's girlish admiration of his plain, but accomplished, and excellent wife. It was one of the trifles which went to form his opinion of the two lasses, and in time to suggest a plan which ended in great joy for one of them. "Now the real fun begins, and I shall be perfectly contented," cried Ethel as they rolled through the London streets towards the dingy Langham Hotel, where Americans love to congregate. Jenny's eyes were sparkling also, and she looked as if quite ready for the new scenes and excitements which the famous old city promised them, though she had private doubts as to whether anything could be more delightful than Scotland. The Sibleys were at the hotel, and the ladies of both parties at once began a round of shopping and sightseeing, while the gentlemen went about their more important affairs. Joe was detailed for escort duty, and a fine time the poor lad had of it, trailing about with 7 ladies by day and packing them into 2 cabs at night for the theaters and concerts they insisted on trying to enjoy in spite of heat and weariness. Mrs. Homer and Jenny were soon tired of this whirl of gaiety, as they called it, and planned more quiet excursions with some hours each day for rest and the writing and reading which all wise tourists make a part of their duty and pleasure. Ethel rebelled, and much preferred the rabble, as Joe irreverently called his troop of ladies, never losing her delight in Regent Street shops, the parks at the fashionable hour, and the evening shows in full blast everywhere during the season. She left the sober party whenever she could escape, and with Mrs. Sibley as chaperone, frolicked about with the gay girls to her heart's content. It troubled Jenny, and made her feel as if she were not doing her duty, but Mrs. Homer consoled her by the fact that a month was all they could give to London, and soon the parties would separate, for the Sibleys were bound for Paris, and the professor for Switzerland and Germany, through August and September. So little Jane gave herself up to the pleasures she loved, and with the new friends, whose kindness she tried to repay by every small service in her power, spent happy days among the famous haunts they knew so well, learning much and storing away all she saw and heard for future profit and pleasure. A few samples of the different ways in which our young travelers improved their opportunities will sufficiently illustrate this new version of the gay grasshopper and the thrifty ant. When they visited Westminster Abbey, Ethel was soon tired of tombs and chapels, and declared that the startling tableau of the skeleton Death peeping out of the half-open door of the tomb to throw his dart at Mrs. Nightingale, and the ludicrous has-relief of some great earl in full peer's robes and coronet being borne to heaven in the arms of fat cherubs puffing under their load, were the only things worth seeing. Jenny sat spellbound in the poet's corner, listening while Mrs. Homer named the illustrious dead around them, followed the verger from chapel to chapel with intelligent interest as he told the story of each historical or royal tomb, and gave up Madame Tussauds waxwork to spend several happy hours sketching the beautiful cloisters in the abbey to add to her collection of watercolors, taken as she went from place to place, to serve as studies for her pupils at home. At the Tower she grew much excited over the tragic spots she visited and the heroic tales she heard of the kings and queens, the noble hearts and wise heads, that pined and perished there. Ethel hated horrors, she said, and cared only for the crown jewels, the faded effigies in the armored gallery, and the queer Highlanders skirling on the bagpipes in the courtyard. At Kew Jenny revelled in the rare flowers, and was stricken with amazement at the Victoria Regia, the royal water-lily, so large that a child could sit on one of its vast leaves as on a green island. Her interest and delight so touched the heart of the crusty keeper that he gave her a nosegay of orchids, which excited the envy of Ethel and the Sibley girls, who were of the party, but had soon wearied of plants and gone off to order tea in Flora's bower, one of the little cottages where visitors repose and refresh themselves with weak tea and Bath buns in such tiny rooms that they have to put their wraps in the fireplace or out of the window while they feast. At the few parties to which they went, for the Homers' friends were of the grave, elderly sort, Jenny sat in a corner taking notes of the gay scene, while Ethel yawned. But the mouse got many a crumb of good conversation as she nestled close to Mrs. Homer, drinking in the wise and witty chat that went on between the friends who came to pay their respects to the professor and his interesting wife. Each night Jenny had new and famous names to add to the list in her journal, and the artless pages were rich in anecdotes, descriptions, and comments on the day's adventures. But the gem of her London collection of experiences was found in a most unexpected way, and not only gave her great pleasure, but made the young gadabouts regard her with sudden respect as one come to honor. "Let me stay and wait upon you. I'd much rather than go to the Crystal Palace, for I shouldn't enjoy it at all with you lying here in pain and alone," said Jenny one lovely morning when the girls came down ready for the promised excursion, to find Mrs. Homer laid up with a nervous headache. "No, dear, you can do nothing for me, thanks. Quiet is all I need, and my only worry is that I am not able to write up my husband's notes for him. I promised to have them ready last night, but was so tired I could not do it," answered Mrs. Homer, as Jenny leaned over her full of affectionate anxiety. "Let me do them. I'd be so proud to help, and I can, for I did copy some one day, and he said it was well done. Please let me. I should enjoy a quiet morning here much better than the noisy party we shall have, since the Sibleys are to go." With some reluctance the invalid consented, and when the rest were gone with hasty regrets, Jenny fell to work so briskly that in an hour or two the task was done. She was looking wistfully out of the window wondering where she could go alone, since Mrs. Homer was asleep and no one needed her, when the professor came in to see how his wife was before he went to the British Museum to consult certain famous books and parchments. He was much pleased to find his notes in order, and after a glance at the sleeping lady, told Jenny she was to come with him for a visit to a place which she would enjoy, though most young people thought it rather dull. Away they went, and being given in charge to a pleasant old man, Jenny roamed over the vast museum where the wonders of the world are collected, enjoying every moment, till Mr. Homer called her away, as his day's work was done. It was late now, but she never thought of time, and came smiling up from the Egyptian hall ready for the lunch the professor proposed. They were just going out when a gentleman met them, and recognizing the American stopped to greet him cordially. Jenny's heart beat when she was presented to Mr. Gladstone, and she listened with all her ears to the silvery un-English voice, and stared with all her eyes at the weary yet wise and friendly face of the famous man. "I'm so glad! I wanted to see him very much, and I feel so grand to think I've really had a bow and a smile all to myself from the Premier of England," said Jenny in a flutter of girlish delight when the brief interview was over. "You shall go to the House of Commons with me and hear him speak some day, then your cup will be full, since you have already seen Browning, heard Irving, taken tea with Jean Ingelow, and caught a glimpse of the royal family," said the professor, enjoying her keen interest in people and places. "Oh, thanks! That will be splendid. I do love to see famous persons, because it gives me a true picture of them, and adds to my desire to know more of them, and admire their virtues or shun their faults. Yes, that sort of mental picture gallery is a good thing to have, and we will add as many fine portraits as we can. Now you shall ride in a hansom, and see how you like that." Jenny was glad to do so, for ladies do not use these vehicles when alone, and Ethel had put on great airs after a spin in one with Joe. Jenny was girl enough to like to have her little adventures to boast of, and that day she was to have another which eclipsed all that her young companions ever knew. A brisk drive, a cozy lunch at a famous chop-house where Johnson had drunk oceans of tea, was followed by a stroll in the park, for the professor liked his young comrade, and was grateful for the well-written notes, which helped on his work. As they leaned against the railing to watch the splendid equipages roll by, one that seemed well known, though only conspicuous by its quiet elegance, stopped near them, and the elder of the two ladies in it bowed and beckoned to Professor Homer. He hastened forward to be kindly greeted and invited to drive along the ladies' mile. Jenny's breath was nearly taken away when she was presented to the Duchess of S., and found herself sitting in a luxurious carriage opposite her Grace and her companion, with a white-wigged coachman perched aloft, and two powdered footmen erect behind. Secretly rejoicing that she had made herself especially nice for her trip with the professor, and remembering that young English girls are expected to efface themselves in the company of their elders, she sat mute and modest, stealing shy glances from under her hat-brim at the great lady, who was talking in the simplest way with her guest about his work, in which, as a member of one of the historical houses of England, she took much interest. A few gracious words fell to Jenny's share before they were set down at the door of the hotel, to the great admiration of the porter, who recognized the liveries and spread the news. "This is a good sample of the way things go in Vanity Fair. We trudge away to our daily work afoot, we treat ourselves to a humble cab through the mud, pause in the park to watch the rich and great, get whisked into a ducal carriage, and come home in state, feeling rather exalted, don't we?" asked the professor as they went upstairs, and he observed the new air of dignity which Jane unconsciously assumed as an obsequious waiter flew before to open the door. "I think we do," answered honest Jane, laughing as she caught the twinkle of his eyes behind the spectacles. "I like splendor, and I am rather set up to think I've spoken to a live duchess. But I think I like her beautiful old face and charming manners more than her fine coach or great name. Why, she was much more simply dressed than Mrs. Sibley, and talked as pleasantly as if she did not feel a bit above us. Yet one couldn't forget that she was noble, and lived in a very different world from ours. That is just it, my dear, she is a noble woman in every sense of the word, and has a right to her title. Her ancestors were kingmakers, and she is lady-in-waiting to the Queen, yet she leads the charities of London, and is the friend of all who help the world along. I'm glad you have met her, and seen so good a sample of a true aristocrat." We Americans affect to scorn titles, but too many of us hanker for them in secret, and bow before very poor imitations of the real thing. Don't fill your journal with fine names, as some much wiser folk do, but set down only the best, and remember, all that glitters is not gold. I will, sir. And Jenny put away the little sermon side by side with the little adventure, saying nothing of either till Mrs. Homer spoke of it, having heard the story from her husband. How I wish I'd been there, instead of fagging round that great palace full of rubbish. A real duchess! Won't the Sibleys stare? We shall hear no more of Lady What's Barclay after this, I guess, and you will be treated with great respect. See if you are not, said Ethel, much impressed with her companion's good fortune and eager to tell it. If things of that sort affect them, their respect is not worth having, answered Jane, quietly accepting the arm Ethel offered her as they went to dinner, a very unusual courtesy, the cause of which she understood and smiled at. Ethel looked as if she felt the reproof, but said nothing, only set an example of greater civility to her companion, which the other girls involuntarily followed, after they had heard of Jenny's excursion with the professor. The change was very grateful to patient Jane, who had borne many small slights in proud silence, but it was soon over, for the party separated, and our friends left the city far behind them, as they crossed the Channel, and sailed up the Rhine to Schwalbach, where Mrs. Homer was to try the steel springs for her rheumatism while the professor rested after his London labors. A charming journey, and several very happy weeks followed as the girls roamed about the little Brunnen, gay with people from all parts of Europe, come to try the famous mineral waters, and rest under the lindens. Jenny found plenty to sketch here, and was busy all day booking picturesque groups as they sat in the Allee Saal, doing pretty woodland bits as they strolled among the hills, carefully copying the arches and statues in St. Elizabeth's Chapel, or the queer old houses in the Jews' quarter of the town. Even the pigs went into the portfolio, with the little swineherd blowing his horn in the morning to summon each lazy porker from its sty to join the troop that trotted away to eat acorns in the oak wood on the hill till sunset called them home again. Ethel's chief amusement was buying trinkets at the booths near the Stahlbrunnen. A tempting display of pretty crystal, agate, and steel jewelry was there, with French bonbons, Swiss carvings, German embroidery and lacework, and most delectable little portfolios of views of fine scenery or illustrations of famous books. Ethel spent much money here, and added so greatly to her store of souvenirs that a new trunk was needed to hold the brittle treasures she accumulated in spite of the advice given her to wait till she reached Paris, where all could be bought much cheaper and packed safely for transportation. Jenny contented herself with a German book, Kaulbacher's Goethe Gallery, and a set of ornaments for each sister, the purple, pink, and white crystals being cheap and pretty trinkets for young girls. She felt very rich with her generous salary to draw upon when she liked, but having made a list of proper gifts, she resisted temptation and saved her money, remembering how much every penny was needed at home. Driving from the ruins of Hohenstein one lovely afternoon, the girls got out to walk up a long hill, and amused themselves gathering flowers by the way. When they took their places again, Ethel had a great bouquet of scarlet poppies, Jenny a nosegay of blue cornflowers for Mrs. Homer, and a handful of green wheat for herself. "You look as if you had been gleaning," said the professor, as he watched the girls begin to trim their rough straw hats with the gay coquelicots and the bearded ears. "I feel as if I were doing that every day, sir, and gathering in a great harvest of pleasure, if nothing else," answered Jenny, turning her bright eyes full of gratitude from one kind face to the other. "My poppies are much prettier than that stiff stuff. Why didn't you get some?" asked Ethel, surveying her brilliant decoration with great satisfaction. "They don't last, but my wheat will, and only grow prettier as it ripens in my hat," answered Jenny, contentedly settling the graceful spires in the straw cord that bound the pointed crown. "Then the kernels will all drop out and leave the husks. That won't be nice, I'm sure," laughed Ethel. "Well, some hungry bird will pick them up and be glad of them. The husks will last a long time and remind me of this happy day. Your poppies are shedding their leaves already, and the odor is not pleasant. I like my honest bread-making wheat better than your opium flowers," said Jenny, with her thoughtful smile, as she watched the scarlet petals float away leaving the green seed vessels bare. Oh, I shall get some artificial ones at my little milliner's, and be fine as long as I like, so you are welcome to your useful, bristly old wheat," said Ethel, rather nettled by the look that passed between the elders. Nothing more was said, but both girls remembered that little talk long afterward, for those two wayside nosegays served to point the moral of this little tale, if not to adorn it. We have no space to tell all the pleasant wanderings of our travelers as they went from one interesting place to another, till they paused for a good rest at Geneva. Here Ethel quite lost her head among the glittering display of jewelry, and had to be watched lest she rashly spend her last penny. They were obliged almost forcibly to carry her out of the enchanting shops, and no one felt safe till she was either on the lake, or driving to Chamonix, or asleep in her bed. Jenny bought a watch, a very necessary thing for a teacher, and this was the best place to get a good one. It was chosen with care and much serious consultation with the professor, and Mrs. Homer added a little chain and seal, finding Jenny about to content herself with a black cord. "It is only a return for many daughterly services, my dear, and my husband wishes me to offer these with thanks to the patient secretary who has often helped him so willingly," she said, as she came to wake Jenny with a kiss on the morning of her 21st birthday. A set of little volumes like those she had admired was the second gift, and Jenny was much touched to be so kindly remembered. Ethel gave her some thread lace which she had longed to buy for her mother at Brussels, but did not, finding it as costly as beautiful. It was a very happy day, though quietly spent sitting by the lake enjoying the well-chosen extracts from Shakespeare, Wordsworth, Byron, Burns, Scott, and other descriptive poets, and writing loving letters home, proudly stamped with the little seal. After that, while Ethel haunted the brilliant shops, read novels in the hotel garden, or listlessly followed the sightseers, Jenny, with the help of her valuable little library, her industrious pencil, and her accomplished guides, laid up a store of precious souvenirs as they visited the celebrated spots that lie like a necklace of pearls around the lovely lake, with Mont Blanc as the splendid opal that fitly clasps the chain. Calvin in Geneva, Voltaire in Ferney, de Stael and Coppet, Gibbon's garden at Lausanne, Byron's prisoner at Chillon, Rousseau's chestnut grove at Clarens, and all the legends, relics, and memories of Switzerland's heroes, romancers, poets, and philosophers, were carefully studied, recorded, and enjoyed, and when at last they steamed away toward Paris, Jenny felt as if her head and her heart and one little trunk held richer treasures than all the jewelry in Geneva. At Lyons her second important purchase was made, for when they visited one of the great manufactories to execute several commissions given to Mrs. Homer, Jenny proudly bought a nice black silk for her mother. This, with the delicate lace, would make the dear woman presentable for many a day, and the good girl beamed with satisfaction as she pictured the delight of all at home when this splendid gift appeared to adorn the dear parent bird, who never cared how shabby she was if her young were well feathered. It was a trial to Jenny, when they reached Paris, to spend day after day shopping, talking to dressmakers, and driving in the Bois to watch the elegant world on parade, when she longed to be living through the French Revolution with Carlyle, copying the quaint relics at Hotel Cluny, or reveling in the treasures of the Louvre. "Why do you want to study and poke all the time?" asked Ethel, as they followed Mrs. Homer and a French acquaintance round the Palais Royal one day with its brilliant shops, cafes, and crowds. "My dream is to be able to take a place as teacher of German and history in a girls' school next year. It is a fine chance, and I am promised it if I am fitted, so I must work when I can to be ready. That is why I like Versailles better than Rue de Rivoli, and enjoy talking with Professor Homer about French kings and queens more than I do buying mock diamonds and eating ices here," answered Jenny, looking very tired of the glitter, noise, and dust of the gay place when her heart was in the conciergerie with poor Marie Antoinette, or the Invalides, where lay the great Napoleon still guarded by his faithful Frenchmen. "What a dismal prospect! I should think you'd rather have a jolly time while you could, and trust to luck for a place by and by, if you must go on teaching," said Ethel, stopping to admire a window full of distracting bonnets. "No, it is a charming prospect to me, for I love to teach, and I can't leave anything to luck. God helps those who help themselves, Mother says, and I want to give the girls an easier time than I have had, so I shall get my tools ready, and fit myself to do good work when the job comes to me," answered Jenny, with such a decided air that the French lady glanced back at her, wondering if a quarrel was going on between the demoiselles. "What do you mean by tools?" asked Ethel, turning from the gay bonnets to a ravishing display of bonbons in the next window. "Professor Homer said one day that a well-stored mind was a tool chest with which one could carve one's way. Now, my tools are knowledge, memory, taste, the power of imparting what I know, good manners, sense, and patience," added Jenny, with a sigh, as she thought of the weary years spent in teaching little children the alphabet. Ethel took the sigh to herself, well knowing that she had been a trial, especially of late, when she had insisted on Jane's company because her own French was so imperfect as to be nearly useless, though at home she had flattered herself that she knew a good deal. Her own ignorance of many things had been unpleasantly impressed upon her lately, for at Madame Dean's pension there were several agreeable English and French ladies, and much interesting conversation went on at the table, which Jenny heartily enjoyed, though she modestly said very little. But Ethel, longing to distinguish herself before the quiet English girls, tried to talk and often made sad mistakes because her head was a jumble of new names and places, and her knowledge of all kinds very superficial. Only the day before she had said in a patronizing tone to a French lady, "Of course we remember our obligations to your Lamartine during our Revolution, and the other brave Frenchmen who helped us." "You mean Lafayette, dear," whispered Jenny quickly, as the lady smiled and bowed, bewildered by the queerly pronounced French, but catching the poet's name. "I know what I mean. You needn't trouble yourself to correct and interrupt me when I'm talking," answered Ethel, in her pert way, annoyed by a smile on the face of the girl opposite, and Jenny's blush at her rudeness and ingratitude. She regretted both when Jane explained the matter afterward, and wished that she had at once corrected what would then have passed as a slip of the tongue. Now it was too late, but she kept quiet and gave Miss Cholmondeley no more chances to smile in that aggravatingly superior way, though it was very natural, as she was a highly educated girl. Thinking of this, and many other mistakes of her own from which Jane tried to save her, Ethel felt a real remorse, and walked silently on, wondering how she could reward this kind creature who had served her so well and was so anxious to get on in her hard, humble way. The orders were all given now, the shopping nearly done, and Mademoiselle Campan, the elderly French lady who boarded at their pension, was always ready to jaunt about and be useful, so why not give Jane a holiday, and let her grub and study for the little while left them in Paris? In a fortnight Uncle Sam was to pick up the girls and take them home, while the Homers went to Rome for the winter. It would be well to take Miss Bassett back in a good humor, so that her report would please Mamma, and appease Papa if he were angry at the amount of money spent by his extravagant little daughter. Ethel saw now, as one always does when it is too late to repair damages, many things left undone which she ought to have done, and regretted living for herself instead of putting more pleasure into the life of this good girl, whose future seemed so uninviting to our young lady with her first season very near. It was a kind plan, and gratified Jenny very much when it was proposed and proved to her that no duty would be neglected if she went about with the Homers and left her charge to the excellent lady who enjoyed chiffons as much as Ethel did, and was glad to receive pretty gifts in return for her services. But alas for Ethel's good resolutions and Jenny's well-earned holiday. Both came to nothing, for Ethel fell ill from too much pastry, and had a sharp bilious attack which laid her up till the uncle arrived. Every one was very kind, and there was no danger, but the days were long, the invalid very fretful, and the nurse very tired, before the second week brought convalescence, and a general cheering and clearing up took place. Uncle Sam was amusing himself very comfortably while he waited for his niece to be able to travel, and the girls were beginning to pack by degrees, for the accumulation of Ethel's purchases made her share a serious task. "There! All are in now, and only the steamer trunk is left to pack at the last moment," said Jenny, folding her tired arms after a protracted struggle with half a dozen new gowns, and a perplexing medley of hats, boots, gloves, and perfumery. 2 large trunks stood in the anteroom ready to go, the third was now done, and nothing remained but the small one and Jenny's shabby portmanteau. "How nicely you have managed! I ought to have helped, only you wouldn't let me and I should have spoilt my wrapper," Come and rest and help me sort out this rubbish, said Ethel, who would have been dressed and out if the arrival of a new peignoir had not kept her in to enjoy the lovely pink and blue thing, all lace and ribbon and French taste. You will never get them into that box, dear, answered Jenny, gladly sitting down beside her on the sofa, which was strewn with trinkets of all sorts, more or less damaged by careless handling, and the vicissitudes of a wandering trunk. I don't believe they are worth fussing over. I'm tired of them, and they look very mean and silly after seeing real jewels here. I'd throw them away if I hadn't spent so much money on them, said Ethel, turning over the tarnished filigree, mock pearl, and imitation coral necklaces, bracelets, and brooches that were tumbling out of the frail boxes in which they came. They will look pretty to people at home who have not been seeing so many as we have. I'll sew up the broken cases, and rub up the silver, and string the beads, and make all as good as new, and you will find plenty of girls at home glad to get them, I am sure, answered Jenny, rapidly bringing order out of chaos with those skillful hands of hers. Ethel leaned back and watched her silently for a few minutes. During this last week our young lady had been thinking a good deal, and was conscious of a strong desire to tell Jane Bassett how much she loved and thanked her for all her patient and faithful care during the 6 months now nearly over. But she was proud, and humility was hard to learn, self-will was sweet, and to own oneself in the wrong a most distasteful task. The penitent did not know how to begin, so waited for an opportunity, and presently it came. "Shall you be glad to get home, Jenny?" she asked in her most caressing tone, as she hung her prettiest locket round her friend's neck, for during this illness all formality and coolness had melted away, and Miss Bassett was Jenny dear, now. "I shall be very, very glad to see my precious people again, and tell them all about my splendid holiday, but I can't help wishing that we were to stay till spring, now that we are here, and I have no teaching, and may never get such another chance. I'm afraid it seems ungrateful when I've had so much, but to go back without seeing Rome is a trial, I confess," answered honest Jane, rubbing away at a very dull paste bandeau. "So it is, but I don't mind so much, because I shall come again by and by, and I mean to be better prepared to enjoy things properly than I am now. I'll really study this winter, and not be such a fool. Jenny, I've a plan in my head. I wonder if you'd like it? I should immensely, and I'm going to propose it to Mamma the minute I get home," said Ethel, glad to seize this opening. "What is it, dearie? Would you like to be my governess and teach me all you know, quietly, at home this winter? I don't want to begin school again just for languages and a few finishing things, and I really think you would do more for me than anyone else, because you know what I need, and are so patient with your bad, ungrateful, saucy girl. Could you? Would you come?" And Ethel put her arms round Jenny's neck with a little sob and a kiss that was far more precious to Jane than the famous diamond necklace of Marie Antoinette, which she had been reading about. "I could and I would with all my heart, if you want me, darling. I think we know and love each other now, and can be happy and helpful together, and I'll come so gladly if your mother asks me," answered Jenny, quick to understand what underlay this sudden tenderness, and glad to accept the atonement offered her for many trials which she would never have told even to her own mother. Ethel was her best self now, and her friend felt well rewarded for the past by this promise of real love and mutual help in the future. So they talked over the new plan in great spirits till Mrs. Homer came to bring them their share of a packet of home letters just arrived. She saw that something unusual was going on, but only smiled, nodded, and went away saying, "I have good news in my letters, and hope yours will make you equally happy, girls." Silence reigned for a time, as they sat reading busily, then a sudden exclamation from Ethel seemed to produce a strange effect upon Jenny, for with a cry of joy she sprang up and danced all over the room, waving her letter wildly as she cried out, "I'm to go! I'm to go! I can't believe it, but here it is! How kind, how very kind, everyone is to me!" And down she went upon her own little bed to hide her face and laugh and cry till Ethel ran to rejoice with her. "Oh, Jenny, I'm so glad! You deserve it, and it's like Mrs. Homer to make all smooth before she said a word. Let me read what Mamma writes to you. Here's my letter, See how sweetly she speaks of you, and how grateful they are for all you've done for me." The letters changed hands, and sitting side by side in an affectionate bunch, the girls read the happy news that granted the cherished wish of one and gave the other real unselfish pleasure in another's happiness. Jane was to go to Rome with the Homers for the winter, and perhaps to Greece in the spring. A year of delight lay before her, offered in such a friendly way, and with such words of commendation, thanks, and welcome, that the girl's heart was full, and she felt that every small sacrifice of feeling, every lonely hour, and distasteful duty was richly repaid by this rare opportunity to enjoy still further draughts of the wisdom, beauty, and poetry of the wonderful world now opened to her. She flew off presently to try to thank her good friends, and came back dragging a light new trunk, in which she nearly buried her small self as she excitedly explained its appearance, while rattling out the trays and displaying its many conveniences. "That dear woman says I'm to send my presents home in the old one by you, and take this to fill up in Rome. Think of it! A lovely new French trunk, and Rome full of pictures, statues, St. Peter's, and the Colosseum. It takes my breath away and makes my head spin. So I see. It's a capital box, but it won't hold even St. Peter's, dear, so you'd better calm down and pack your treasures." "I'll help," cried Ethel, sweeping about in her gay gown, almost as wild as Jane, who was quite upset by this sudden delicious change in her prospects. How happily she laid away in the old trunk the few gifts she had ventured to buy, and those given her, the glossy silk, the dainty lace, the pretty crystals, the store of gloves, the flask of cologne, the pictures and books, and last of all the sketches which illustrated the journal kept so carefully for those at home. "Now, when my letter is written and the check with all that is left of my salary put in, I am done. There's room for more, and I wish I'd got something else, now I feel so rich. But it is foolish to buy gowns to pay duties on, when I don't know what the girls need. I feel so rich now, I shall fly out and pick up some more little pretties for the dears. They have so few, anything will be charming to them," said Jenny, proudly surveying her box, and looking about for some foreign trifle with which to fill up the corners. "Then let me put these in, and so be rid of them. I shall go to see your people and tell them all about you, and explain how you came to send so much rubbish." As she spoke, Ethel slipped in several Swiss carvings, the best of the trinkets, and a parcel of dainty Parisian ties and sashes which would gladden the hearts of the poor, pretty girls, just beginning to need such aids to their modest toilets. A big box of bonbons completed her contribution, and left but one empty corner. "I'll tuck in my old hat to keep all steady. The girls will like it when they dress up, and I'm fond of it, because it recalls some of my happiest days," said Jenny, as she took up the well-worn hat and began to dust it. A shower of grain dropped into her hand, for the yellow wheat still kept its place and recalled the chat at Schwalbach. Ethel glanced at her own hat with its faded artificial flowers, and as her eye went from the small store of treasures so carefully and happily gathered to the strew of almost useless finery on her bed, she said soberly, "You were right, Jenny. My poppies are worthless, and my harvest a very poor one. Your wheat fell in good ground, and you will glean a whole stack before you go home. Well, I shall keep my old hat to remind me of you, and when I come again, I hope I shall have a wiser head to put into a new one.